Howdy! This is a compilation of every Kirby video I have made so far. I love finding these big videos here on YouTube to put on in the background while I do chores or play a game, and now that I'm just about halfway done with the franchise, I hope this video can serve that purpose for you. If you are new to the channel, this is the best place to start. I'm able to clear up a few copyright issues, so this will be the most complete version of the series. I'm sticking to a weekly upload schedule at the moment, so if you like what you see, make sure to stick around. And without further delay, let's begin. I have no fond memories of Kirby. I didn't grow up with any of the games, and the only time I interacted with the little pink dude was in Smash 64. This is important to know before I say my next spicy statement. I think Kirby is a flawless video game series because it is the strongest video game archetype. Now, you can definitely point out a few technical issues with the series. It's too easy, some games have silly gimmicks, Kirby is pink, I get that. The reason I find it flawless is in its relationship to video games as a whole. But to define that, we also need to explore the idea of an archetypical video game. What do we consider to solely be a video game element? Something that cannot be recreated in a movie or a book. Something that can only be understood and enjoyed in this interactive media. And that's my excuse. It's been a stressful year, so I'm gonna play a bunch of Kirby games, in order, until I cannot continue. Let's begin! Legend goes that Masahiro Sakurai fell asleep in the woods and dreamed about the moon. When he woke up, he began screaming and didn't stop until Kirby was finished. That's true. I read it. The series got its start on the Game Boy with its first title, Kirby's Dream Land. It's about a half hour long, which is how it went back in the day. It's honestly a miracle how much actually happens in those 30 minutes. You can see the careful attention put into the gameplay to make it an experience you wouldn't mind having a dozen times over. Each level opens with a cutscene that goes a long way to establish the tone of this game, something truly unheard of for the Game Boy and perfectly pantomimes the upbeat mood of Dreamland. Kirby can fly indefinitely, which always brings up the idea of why we would ever subject ourselves to doing anything other than fly over every obstacle. The game counteracts this issue by having the tightly zoomed in camera and verticality to balance this superpower. This is the first time we see the main gameplay loop of sucking up enemies and items and using them as range attacks. Nowadays this seems like a given, but this was totally new at the time. When you're holding something in your mouth, you cannot fly, so you have to be careful in the platforming areas. A lot of this game marks the budding ideas that will become mainstays. You got your wispy woods, the microphone screen clear, and the final battle against King Dedede. I love seeing the curry power up here. I always thought that this was originally from Smash, but what is Smash Brothers if not a collection of every video game known to man? I'm also surprised to see this on-rail shooting section show up in the very first title. It seems to be a running tradition to have just a kiss of a different gameplay style for each game, usually just before you hit the very end as the ramp to the climax. When you get to the final battle against the big bad Dedede, you learn the handful of moves. This may not seem like much, but if my foreshadowing wasn't blatant enough, you'll see these same maneuvers again very soon, actually giving you a hand in future final fights, friendo. Though there is no enemy suck for godly powers, this is a genuine Kirby experience, albeit a little bare bone. Keep in mind what you see here, as most of the next games will be the same concept, but pushed towards their realization. If you're looking for flesh, we need to move to the NES for Kirby's Adventure. This is what I consider to be the first substantial Kirby game. Everything that was on the Game Boy is new and improved, and boy, we are pink! I love the intro to this game. It's literally a tutorial on how to draw Kirby that immediately shows massive charm, still wrapped in that simple emotive comic style we saw previously. The cutscenes before each world return, and the very first thing they show you is how sucking up enemies now rewards you with a new power. When you add in the mini-games like the toy crane and the quick draw, it is really hard to believe that this is an NES game. And on that note, it does suffer from its ambition because, buddy, this game will chug. Which doesn't surprise me seeing all these moving parts. Look at this airship level and think about how Mario went about presenting a similar concept, and Kirby comes across at a whole other level. As cool and critical as the power-ups are, it does throw the difficulty of the game out of whack. Just look at the original fight against Wispy Woods on Game Boy compared to now. Granted, this is the first boss of the game, and surprisingly, this game does have quite a few difficult sections, though that mostly comes down to not having any ability during a fight, and having to win the good old-fashioned way. Every world has its own theme that's present in both the levels and in the overworld, even sporting a transition using the Warp Star, giving way more believability than any NES game really deserves to have. This whole game is just the first step of expanding the experience that Dreamland was trying to offer, and finally having just enough room to stretch its legs out and tell a full story. There are all these little tricks that make this game feel so much more complex than it actually is. The ball power-up has this strange physics effects, and circling around these towers gives off a strong 3D feel. The sense of progression goes a long way to making each level feel like a real place, rather than some programmed stage. Getting closer to the end of the game, you'll ascend this Twilight world and take on a handful of challenge rooms, but once you get to the 6th stage, something magical happens. It's a little weird to feel nostalgic about a game that was literally the only other game you've released so far, but I cannot think of another level from an NES game that not only caught me this off guard, but made me smile with its callback. It was at this exact moment that I was sold on the series, and for the silliest reasons, I feel like I've finally understood how well crafted these games truly are. We match with D2D once again for an exact copy of the original fight, but the victory here isn't the end. In a strange twist, you see the king grab your feet and give you this genuine warning to stop your quest. We naturally ignore this and land smack dab in the middle of the actual boss fight. This is the first time that Kirby does its weird calling card of having a seemingly cute and relaxed game all the way up until the final boss, which it always is some disturbingly out of place monster. Not that this is a bad thing. I'm glad it's not just another showdown with the big penguin boy, but it's all tied to this weird background lore of the games. Originally, I was just gonna stick to the mainline games in the series, but when I think about it, like I really think about it, we gotta talk about Dream Course. And that's for a couple of reasons. This was the next game in the timeline and the first on the Super Nintendo, which is weird because by the time Adventure came out, the SNES was 3 years deep, but hey, I'm just some dork on the internet. This was also the first time we see a co-op title, which is absolutely perfect. This may seem like a weird golf game, but you would be mistaken. This is so much more infuriating than golf, and I absolutely love it. You grab one of your buddies, don't explain any of the controls, and enjoy straining a friendship as hard as you can through 8 holes. Unfortunately for me, my buddy already knows how this goes and just wipes the floor with me. If you know, you know. It's gonna take both hands to get this one done. By itself, it's quaint, but when you can bounce off another person, there's just enough engagement in these short bursts of gameplays to have a lot of fun. Also, it's on the Switch VC, so just try it. It's gnar, dude. Okay, getting back to the main entries, we hit up another dream. We kick it back to the Game Boy and miraculously it's in color now. Thank you, emulation. Surprisingly, this game is loaded with content, including the power-ups and hub worlds from before. You also get these animal friends to help you on your quest. I ran into this hamster, and I don't know much, but I definitely know I want him to be my friend. I looked it up and his name is Rick. Rick! Absolutely wonderful. There's also a fish and a bird, but come on, Rick is in the house. No, you can't hang out here. There are about a half dozen abilities in this game, and each one has an alternative mode where you're with an animal buddy. Sometimes this can be extremely effective, like the cutter paired with Coo, or adorable, like the freeze with Rick. It took a second for it to click in my mind that you're actually a snowman, and then I was stoked. There's so much going on in this game. This is the first time we collect stars for a 1-up. I know, groundbreaking. But there's a ton of bosses and a few of them put up a solid challenge. You can stand to have a couple more tries. We still have that issue where if you have a power-up in a boss encounter, you have a crazy advantage, but they attempt to counter this by rewarding more damage when fighting the boss with the intended suck and blow method. There are a few drawbacks, mainly just in the design. Here we have a friend that's guarded by these ineffectual sensories, and there's no way to save them. In fact, touching the bag hurts you. I'm pretty sure you could break those black box using the electric power-up, but heyo, I don't have one. Goodbye, mystery animal. You will be missed. And don't even get me started with this part. Being united with my boy and then just barely not being able to leave this incredibly open platform. Not only do I not get to chill with Rick, but they make me destroy him myself like this is Metal Gear Solid 3. You also have this section here where you have to choose between 3 different routes and 2 of them just outright kill you. You also have to do this 4 times in a row, so you're just about guaranteed to eat it at least once. Shh, don't look. Good night, sweet prince. At the end we face off against old boy Dedede, and this time he's got this angry narcoleptic vibe. Genuinely got bodied a few times here to the point where finally winning felt ridiculously good. And that's it. That's the true ending. Totally accomplished. Pay zero attention to this part right here. Don't even look at it. Alright, it's time to stop sandbagging this video, because now we are on to what I consider to be the peak of Kirby games. It's Superstar, baby! While I was genuinely surprised by how much I liked the original trilogy of games, there was always a sense that the hardware was holding them back. Whether it was the lag or ideas that didn't have enough room to grow, these games are just before their time when it came to its hardware. But on the Super Nintendo? Listen, these first few games were all about figuring out how to crawl, but now that we have all this extra power, we skip over walking and we are soaring. Also note that this game came out 1 year after Dreamland 2. Either they were working on the split from the Game Boy, or they just had so much they wanted to do after finishing Dream Course that it all spilled out into this magnum opus. Either way, it's impressive. The presentation is all new. You have a corkboard of adventures to choose from. Spring Breeze is spiritually the best starting point and even comes with a tutorial if you feel so inclined. I love the way that it refers to the SNES controller as that gray thing with the purple buttons, and it even hits us with a solid GLHF. Some of you keen viewers might remember these levels. It's a remake of Dreamland with all new bells and whistles. It even has the little stage introductions. This is just a taste of the new content. All the bosses have been trivialized by the power-ups and buddy system. Even Mario can't believe it. Hey, Mario! You get to the end in about 10 minutes, where the credits roll, but wicked fast this time. As we reach the final screen, Kirby holds up the sign one more time, but instead of saying bye-bye, it now pushes us to discover the actual game. Now that we have a grasp on the new controls and features, we are officially in there like swimwear. Dynablade is your first real taste of this updated rigmarole. The only bit of story you get is that Dynablade is destroying all the crops and we have to stomp her into the ground. Nothing new for this strange wad of gum. We get another set of tutorials, this time focused on the copy ability and how to get the most out of it. Once you actually drop into the first level, you can see how the new design is implemented. The landscape is longer with more space to compensate for your increased speed, while still keeping the verticality from the Game Boy games. This is the first time the camera feels like it's the appropriate distance from your character that frees up your movement. The portable games were super cramped around Kirby, and the NES game was like playing through a window. This is also the first time we get to use the copy abilities where the game compensates for it, and it is absolutely sublime. Every power-up is beautifully animated with its own style and approach. No matter what you end up using, you always have a way to succeed just by the insane power these abilities give you. It really feels like this is what the gameplay was always shooting for, and it's finally realized on this console. And you might as well double that feeling now because this is a true-to-form 2-player game. When you play solo, you can take your sweet moves and conjure a buddy to serve you until death, just like real friends. Even though this is a brand new mechanic, it fits so naturally in the gameplay that it feels like it's always been a part of the series. Your CPU buddy rarely gets in your way and can pull off some really gnarly damage. Not to mention that you have items like the wheel where you can team up for more awesome combinations. Of course, you can also get a real-life buddy to come over and play some Kirby with you, and it's just a simple drop-in and drop-out system. You will make out with your friend a handful of times, so make sure you're ready to have that conversation. Sadly, they do look really awkward when you decide to triplify yourself for the choreographed dance session, but that's just how it goes in the dreamland, you know? I love how the backgrounds have that Donkey Kong style 3D objects pressed into pixels. I know that's a spicy topic for you aesthetic people, but I still think it's charming, really putting that silicone graphics station to use. After your extremely short journey, you finally face off against the robot bird herself. Luckily, she didn't have the foresight to bring a friend with her, so we enjoy a cozy, unfair advantage. It wasn't even close. But shortly after victory, you realize that this bird you just crunched was actually a mother. Logically, Kirby just decides to raise them instead. That's a pretty bold power move. Makes me think Kirby's a part of some Greek legend. Before we jump into the mighty Meta Knight fighty fight, I think we should talk about the mini-games included with this game. The quick draw game from Adventure makes a spiritual return with Samurai Kirby. It's basically the same game. Wait for the mark, press the button as fast as you can. I still cannot beat this penguin dude, and honestly, I get so anxious waiting for the mark I mostly just botch the jump. Okay. Whew. Okay. There's also Megaton Punch, which is my jam. Granted, it's just 3 quick time events in a row, but there's something so magical to nailing all the prompts and splitting your planet in half. Then there's also Gourmet Race. I'll be honest, outside of the absolute banger of a song made for the game, there really isn't much to say about it. Maybe my movement isn't up to snuff and I really get that race mode, but there just isn't much here for me. Gloves off, it's time to really get into this game. Revenge of Meta Knight is the only game with a constant timer that really bumps the internal tempo. Although this is a bit cheesed with the timer going off at different speeds depending on what section you're in. I remember watching Game Grumps play this way back in the day and thinking it was so insane that they ended their game on the literal last second of the timer, but if I had paid attention, I would have seen that it's programmed to come down to the wire every time. Instead of an overworld, you see a progression of how you're wrecking the halberd with all these little interjections from Meta Knight and his crew. You're just blindly slapping an enormous spacecraft out of the sky with a buddy, and these underlings are losing their minds. This campaign has mad character. And I love the color palette as well. Everything taking place at sunset with heavy shades of orange bouncing between the forest and the metallic hull of the ship. It all feels like the final chapter of Kirby's story. It's not. Somehow, I stumbled onto this little secret area and there's even a little taste of secret dialogue. I know this is probably just an Easter egg, but it definitely made me think back to all the potential secret doors I've missed. The distance between this game and the previous iterations' content is ridiculous. Finally, we face off with the man himself, the big dog of the sky, the bane of Brawl, Meta Knight. And this guy absolutely kicks my ass. The damage he can dish out with that sword is ridiculous, but through perseverance, we finally win the battle, revealing that Meta Knight is actually also a Kirby thing. This revelation would have meant a lot more if they didn't already do this on the NES, but don't worry. They will continue to reveal this for every single Kirby game for the rest of time. We begin a harrowing race to escape the base, riding on our friend to victory. Why did we do all this again? Don't think about that. We have treasure to plunder. If you haven't noticed, for the most part every Kirby campaign is based around going from point A to point B with a handful of extra sections to reward a 1-up or a tomato. This is not the case with our final 2 offerings. With the Great Cave Offensive, the main goal is to collect as many treasures as you can. There are 60 in total, all hidden in this labyrinthian cave. Most of these are naturally found through exploration, but quite a few of them will take a puzzle and really keen eyes to be able to get them. Off the bat, the music of this stage immediately reminds me of this. Oh man. It really does set the tone for this stage, actually. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's definitely the weakest experience on offer. Kirby always feels best when you're on the move, pushing forward to constantly see new things and experience new challenges. It doesn't sit well when you're trying to precisely platform switch doors and looking for the way forward. This is a minor complaint though. There's a lot of variety all connected between these kart rides, plenty of boss fights to stumble on. A lot of the difficult treasures to find are also references to other Nintendo games. Oh, Mr. Saturn. I'll be talking about you soon. I love the RPG boss. When Kirby is at its best, it flows with this steeze that reflects in its design and visuals like swimming through us in a cosmic backstroke. They know how good their gameplay loop is, and at this point they're just dabbing on you with a cornucopia of features. And that's about it for the Big Dig Cave Wave. This is the only story that doesn't end on a climax. You kinda just get up to the entrance and leave. Yeah, I get I only found a fourth of the treasures, but what are you gonna do? I'm trying to get to the big sun and moon conflict. And I don't mean the Pokemons! This is it. The big moment. The sun and the moon are fighting, and we have to kill God. Concentrate, and do your best. I love that this overworld is free roam. Granted, you can't go anywhere outside of the normal progression, but it's just a nice touch to get to fly to each planet. They all point towards each other once finished to guide your star as well to demonstrate the unearthly powers you're conjuring. Big news, buddy boy. There is no more murder for power. You can't gain anything from destroying your enemies other than sick satisfaction. The trade-off is, once you do find a power-up, you have it forever. You can switch whenever you feel like it, which also means you get infinite friends. This whole saga is a culmination of everything you've done so far. The bosses, the zones, the enemies, the music, everything raised to its crescendo, literally fighting through the stars in the sky until you finally find the biggest boy. He grants us one wish, and we are struck down by this purple jester, stealing our wish to gain control over the galaxy. Surprise! We have an on-rail shooters to go find Marks and mush him into the dirt. I really love this generator part inside of Nova. The three-dimensional work is genuinely impressive for the time, and only sort of makes me want to pull my hair out. We give the giant clock an aneurysm and prepare to face off against the communist jester. Look at this. It's a beautiful callback to adventure, and the idea is finally realized. Everything finally feels realized. We win, the giant idiot splits into a million pieces, the sun and moon go back to their jobs, and Kirby finally goes back to sleep. Oh yeah! And there you have it. You do get a boss rush mode, the prototype for the Smash All-Stars section, with the in-between stage holding limited healing and power-ups, but this is the end of the line, at least for now. Taking everything that we've seen here at just the beginning of the Kirby series, I can't help but think that this is such a perfect representation of what a video game is. Sure, they are on the easy side, shorter than most games when considering their original price. Most of the time you'll have repackaged versions of these original stories, but that's not what makes this such a great archetype. This experience can only exist in the world of games. The premise is so far removed from fictional realism. The motivation is non-existent. The function of powering up through suck and flying from planet to planet, eating sweets and curry along the way. Every single aspect is totally fleshed out and given to the player in a way that is solely unique and remarkable. All this feeling, the feedback, what you take away from this game is something you cannot find anywhere else. If you ask me, I'd say that's what a game should be, and in that way, Kirby is flawless. In my first video, I tried to prove the idea that Kirby, as a franchise, was flawless by the virtue of being a perfect video game archetype. I realize now that this was a stupid thing to do. There's no way that you could ever prove this idea. The argument itself is biased. You would need to completely redefine what constitutes a flaw and how it would be excused because of some ethereal idea of what an archetype is. This is complete hearsay, an arbitrary, sensationalized excuse for a purpose, and if I could go back and change it, I absolutely wouldn't. You want to know why? because all of you have taught me so much about the series, its history, its underlying story, and most importantly, that Kirby being pink is not a flaw. In this video, I'm asking a much more reasonable question. We all got to see Kirby's origin and his animal buddies all pushed to the limit in one big superstar finale. To me, those games represent the original Kirby formula that was perfected on the Super Nintendo, then somehow pushed even further on the DS with Superstar Ultra. I cover this origin in my first video, so I would suggest checking that out first if you haven't, but it's not necessary. The next question is, how does Kirby follow this up, and do these sequels succeed? I have picked out a few of the next titles in the series that represent what I consider to be the second wave of this pink tsunami. We're talking about new consoles, new mechanics, even new dimensions. Through these, we will answer the first part of the question and decide if Kirby keeps that glowing record. We begin with Kirby's Dream Land 3. This came out 1 year after Superstar. You all let me know that there were actually two teams making Kirby games at this time. Masahiro Sakurai led Superstar, while Shinichi Shimomura directed the Dreamland trilogy. This also explains the deep contrast between these two games, both in mechanics and aesthetics. Before I get into this game, I just want to explain my introduction to it. I put out the first Kirby video. I say to myself, oh man, that's a lot of people. I need to work on a follow-up right away. I go to the Switch emulator with Superstar still fresh in my mind, and this is what I see. I'll tell you what, I was not expecting this drastic of a change, but outside of looking at it, I had a much bigger problem. I really didn't like how it controlled. It felt so clunky and slow. I wasn't able to move with any freedom, and it felt like every input I made was delayed by an agonizing amount of time. This is when I panicked. How am I going to talk about Kirby when the very first game I jump back into feels like I've submerged my hands in honey? Obviously, I do what any rational person would do and pushed all my problems into the future and only dwelled on it most of the time. Luckily, the solution to this issue was twofold. This game was developed by a different team, and I realized it needed to be considered on its own merit, not how it compares to Superstar. I also found a new version of the game that smoothed out the controls and helped clean up the visuals. I know this is all beside the point, but I think it's important to know that if a game doesn't flow right on Switch emulation, there's a good chance it isn't the game's fault. So, did this fix all the control issues and make it a perfect game? No, but it does tie into what I find to be the most interesting aspect of what will tie these games together in my little split theory. Trust me, we will get to that soon. It hits us with that slick slideshow, and off the bat, I fell in love with this art style. It still impresses me that they could take the Super Nintendo and pull off an aesthetic that looks more like paint than pixels. I'm looking at you, Yoshi's Island. They pull off this relaxed crayon-drawn atmosphere that immediately defines itself from the other games. It was actually shocking transitioning from Superstar to this because the direction was so different, but still captured that Kirby charm. And the soundtrack might just be my favorite of them all. There's such a distinct dreamy feel that complements the more methodical pacing of this game. Whenever you're listening to one of those No Thoughts Head Empty compilation and a Kirby song pops up, it's probably from this game. This is all presented in a manner that demands a calmer approach like we've seen in earlier titles, but now the camera doesn't get in your way. You always have plenty of room to read your surroundings and, more importantly, decide on the best path forward. This is difficult for me personally because I usually play my Kirby games by blasting forward as fast as I can, and this game will generally punish that. I don't mind this because this game can actually get down to the wire where your lives matter, but a game over isn't overly punishing. One of those perfectly balanced life systems that we don't really see anymore. But who cares about game mechanics when we have animal buddies again? I mean, the title card itself shows off all the friends we've made, both new and old, and the very first cutscene is me walking up to Rick. This is it. I finally get to, hey, who's this? Hey, I'm sorry, Rick, I'm gonna call you later. Like Dreamland 2, traveling with a buddy will change how your ability works as well as changing your mode of movement. These are so creative and lead to a few excellent combinations. The cat's name is Nago, and he is absolutely excellent. If you use the lightning power, he rubs you until you become an unstoppable ball of static electricity. Combine this with his triple jump and you are free to schmoove, my guy. All these options present an otherwise unseen strategy to your gameplay. Like here, I have the boomerang and Nago shoots up at this impossible angle, so I gotta go with Choo Choo the octopus because that attack is much easier to use in these tight corridors. You have to choose wisely because they will look absolutely heartbroken if they aren't chosen. Why would you do that to me, Shinichi? This also plays into the multiplayer for this game with the addition of GUI. Now, I'll be honest, I only discovered this when I would button mash and I never understood what the deal was, just running around and taking things. It took me a long time to figure out how to make the blue glob go away, and I still have no idea what they want. You'll learn that each level has an objective outside of the usual run right until victorious. They never directly say what that objective is, only hinting with the level select picture and a jingle whenever you're close to what you need to do. Most of the time this is just a simple task that you won't know about until you reach the end. If it's a flower, you should probably not step on the flowers. If it's a girl hamster, you probably need Rick. Sometimes this will be a direct minigame, like Guess the Gordo or Where's the Snake? Every one of these must be finished to get to the true ending, and it gives this game a lot of mileage. One of the objectives is to find all the pieces to rob the robot to return to Professor Hector, and there's also my favorite cameo with defeating all these Metroids to impress Samus. I didn't do it, I'm sorry. This is also the first time that we see Adeline with the hardest boss fight. Yeah, worse than Zero. You can quote me on that one. Each world captures its own feel in that typical Kirby fashion. Grass, water, rock, cloud, and ice with a boss to cap off every adventure. I feel like more effort went into the backgrounds of these levels, and it helps give each world a distinct feel. The hand-drawn style helps make everything work together with that classic Nintendo steez, while still getting a taste of that weird HAL aesthetic from time to time. One of my favorite sections was here near the end of World 5 in the Iceberg Fortress. I came into this level on my last leg with no lives to spare. I had a strong urge to SD so I could at least come back with a full health bar, but hey,
I'm not that kind of guy!
This was also one of the rare times that I had Kine as my animal buddy, and I was really digging the whole impenetrable beam shot. Over the course of this gauntlet, I slowly started to pick up lives and health. Never enough to feel safe, but just confident enough that I was able to finish strong. While this challenge was more or less self-imposed, I still think about that as my favorite part of this game. Every room was a brand new experience that worked perfectly with the design of this title. This all leads to a fake-out ending with King Dedede sporting a tummy goblin. They always treat my guys so terribly. Credits flow with an enemy roll call while still hinting at the true ending ahead. Now I'm just saying, I really wanted to front load my discussion of this game with what I like about it because unfortunately, I had my fair share of issues as well, but before I get into that, I do want to say that it's still a great game, and for a casual playthrough, I think it all works perfectly fine, even though I can't help but feel that this is the weakest Kirby game I've played up until this point. While this may be the best game to look at, it still has these sticky control issues that stand out compared to the buttery smooth feel of the games we've played before. Average really sticks out in a forest of perfection, and this game sits on some mighty giant shoulders. With the right combination of friend and power-up, you can get to a fun moving speed, but most of the time you're tied to these really slow slogging sections that just bum me out. If you don't have Kine and you're in the water, you're about to eat it for the next few minutes, and when you're with Ku, the vertical controls can get super annoying. You end up taking all these hits that don't feel like your fault. Remember that great experience with the Ice Fortress? Well, right after that you immediately do another gauntlet, but this time it's just climbing a tower. One room you fight a boss, next room you get a health pickup, over and over and over. It really took the heat out of this final section and made the subsequent fight against Dedede feel as arbitrary as this boss rush to penguin combo has been to this point. All of this is just minor issues if you're just running through the first time, but when you tread back to try to get all these objectives done, the charm wears off pretty quick and you're left trying to figure out these cryptic puzzles like a deflated jellyfish. Consider this part here as an example of the design falling through. There's no way to know which cannon will actually go forward or just make you backtrack through a room with no threats. I don't know why these sections keep popping up, but when I got to the end and realized I didn't fulfill the secondary objective, I was dreading the idea of playing it again. I can see a situation where this amount of backtracking would be a good thing. If this was a game you got brand new, you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you beat it the same day you got it. I also understand that with games like Kirby and Crash Bandicoot that the full game experience is tied to the idea that you would 100% complete it, and so they designed it around that. I just find that in this situation where you're spending a lot of time in places you've already experienced, the little issues with control and enemy placement really start to take their toll. I'll be honest, I've only completely beat a handful of games, and that generally comes from how much I enjoy it intrinsically. It's not that I care about the reward at the end, it's because simply playing the game is inherently fun. But even with that being said, I still appreciate that the true payoff is saved for those willing to put the time in. The battle against Zero is weird and tough. They transform from the simple black orb that we've seen so far into this absolute nightmare ball. And if that wasn't bad enough, you then have to fight its bleeding eyeball as it circles around. Hey, yeah, what's going on right now? When you think about Kirby, does any of this come to mind? Is this just the big, terrifying secret that die-hard Kirby fans are keeping from us? It's like the underbelly of the series is written by a ghost that haunts the HAL laboratory. We finish up for real and get that real credit closure. This leads into what defines this next era of Kirby games. Imagine after Dreamland 3, there was a split down the middle of this franchise. On one half we have Superstar with its fast and frenetic gameplay, and on the other we have Dreamland 3 with its more conceptual design. The next few games that we're about to get into represent this division and pave a path for what a Kirby sequel is, starting with the true realization of Dreamland 3 in its most beautiful form. My friends, welcome to the third dimension. You might be thinking to yourself that the Crystal Shards isn't a remake of Dreamland 3, and you would be totally right. But I find that this game is a wonderful example of a spiritual successor that takes that initial concept and truly flourishes. Like any game we've seen before, the opening paints a simple picture. A kingdom is under attack, someone wakes up Kirby, and it's go time. While we may be living in a polygonal world, we are still playing a true-to-form 2D platformer, which is still a perfectly apt setting for the little dude. The largest change to the formula is in the power-ups themselves. We now have the ability to combine any ability we find to make our fresh approach. You can double up on the same ability to make it incredibly powerful, or experiment with different combinations until you find something that works for you. They demonstrate this beautifully in the first level by having enemies with the fire and boomerang attacks. Combining these gets you a flame sword, and buddy, this might just be my favorite of them all. I won't say that they're all winners, but each ability shows a great deal of creativity and always keeps you guessing as to what you're gonna get. Instead of secondary objectives, we have the titular Crystal Shards. At first, they're basically out in the open, but eventually you find that they can be pretty tricky to get, sometimes requiring particular weapon combos to get to them. Even so, they do a great job of opening levels with certain enemies that will make the best combination for the stage, as well as getting to these shards. And would you believe it? They end the second level with an homage fight with Adeline. They even use one of the enemies from the fight in 3 and cap it off with that one-hit KO against the child. This fight ties our previous battle to the beginning of this new game in a way that says not only is this within the same story, our ending there is only our beginning here. And on that note, let me tell you why this game is the real Dreamland 3. The combination of abilities is reminiscent to the Animal Friend powers in the Dreamland series, which is why I think they only make a cameo in this game. Well, at least the good buddies do. The worlds you visit are nearly identical to the ones we saw in 3. Grass, desert, jungle, ice. More than being similar, a lot of the stages take direct influence from the previous levels and hone in on the style from before. When you look at this forest area or the big pyramid zone, you can see the same energy went into these graphics. Instead of pursuing a children's book style, they mainly focus on making the 3D look as convincing as possible. This is accomplished by the background elements and the excellent pathing of the stage. Most Kirby games have a section where you approach a giant castle and ascend to the top, but none of them have felt nearly as convincing as it does here. The way your path curves to show off the structure in the background, only to lead to its entrance, is executed without flaw. When you're in this building, you really get a sense of how massive it all is as it culminates into this large rotating room. In these sections, you see the same slower pacing from before, but this time there's a good reason for the approach. Everything is built around this three-dimensional world, and they want you to feel like you're actually traveling through it. As you can guess, I find that they pulled this off beautifully. And even though I consider this a full upgrade to Dreamland 3, I don't think it should fully replace it. I think there's room for both as they strive for two separate feelings. It's more like the last few episodes of Neon Genesis Evangelion compared to the movie. Yes, I did just compare Kirby to Evangelion. You would be surprised how much they share in common. Even the final battle against Zero hits the same unsettling feeling, but this time it feels like a real spectacle to shoot and fly in this 3D environment. Even the true final cutscene shows a level of personality from Kirby we haven't really seen up to this point. But just like before, it doesn't matter how Crystal Shards compares to Dreamland 3. How does it stand on its own merit? I'm happy to say this game holds up wonderfully, but strangely enough, I think that mainly comes from its brevity. You can get through this game in 2 hours, and it's only about another hour or so to get the true ending. While I can see this being devastating if you paid full price for the title back in the day, in the present moment it makes for a great experience. It's the perfect balance of introducing new landscapes and enemies while never staying past its welcome. It really does feel like they went for the more conceptual and visual focused design from before, but knew to keep everything at an appropriate length. It's in this tight design that I see the biggest benefit. When I think back on my time with it, I know that I would really enjoy playing through it again. All the different powers make you wonder what each level would play like, and the shards are hidden in just a way that complement the stellar level design. There's also a lot less to collect, so that's a yeehaw from me. I hold this game to the same level as Superstar in my mind for being as unique and fully realized as its own experience. It's also a perfect example of the divided nature of the Kirby sequels. So, we have one side of this division, the Dreamland flow with the brief but precise formula. Now we need to get back to what made Kirby a masterpiece in the first place, the other side of this coin that echoes the speed and effortless style of Superstar. For that, we kick it all the way to the GBA for Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. This is what I consider to be the true successor to Superstar. Sure, it looks pretty similar with that effect-heavy, pixel-dense style, but the real similarity comes from how it feels. This game controls like butter. It's the reason I really fell in love with this series in the first place, the nice flowing design that lets you cruise through the environment while blasting enemies. Everything ties together in these wonderful strings of content, leading up to a big boss battle that caps off the experience. You might think that this sounds like the progression of every Kirby game ever made, but would you believe me if I told you that this game is actually a Metroidvania? I mean, I wouldn't. I was completely thrown off when I beat the first boss and it kicked me back to the overworld without a new door to go through. You have to follow these gates with the shining stars to find all the doors you missed before, and when I realized that, I was amazed. I really wonder why people get on Kirby's case so often about stagnant content when every time I pick up a mainline game, something like this happens. But don't worry, we'll be seeing this series through to the end, so there'll be plenty of time to figure out what you mean. Another huge twist to the formula is our actual character. In the opening exposition, there's a good Meta Knight and a bad one, and the bad one splits Kirby into Technicolor quadruplets and seals the good Meta Knight in the mirror and breaks the mirror. I can't tell if this is a complex, simple story or just simply complex. After this, you can call on the squad and they'll come to your aid. They can drop 1-ups, healing items, and they usually all rock different power-ups in case that's what's halting your progress. At first, I just kind of ignored their existence and went on my way, but I soon realized how helpful they can be in both boss fights and subtly leading you to the next place you should go. The amount of detail this game pulls off at any given moment makes it genuinely impressive as a Game Boy title. Even with all these impressive new elements, the core is still distinctly Kirby. The ideas all come and go quickly without ever putting a pause on the action. Each power-up feels great to use while still being distinct enough to utilize at different areas. In full honesty, I found myself playing more of this game's sister title, Nightmare in Dreamland. This is a remake of Kirby's Adventure that utilizes the same assets as Amazing Mirror while fixing all the little quirks that came with the original. I think it's a perfect example on how this split playstyle is represented in these sequels. Using this new format, we get to experience a classic style from a new perspective. I think this translates wonderfully as a complete improvement to the original game. As for the story of Amazing Mirror, I plan on getting to it, but I have another video in the works about the good old-fashioned name combination genre, and I promise that's where you want to see this. My main point was to highlight this splitting of the franchise and overall get to the 2 final questions. Also, it's like 10 hours long and I need to finish this video. So, in the end, Kirby followed its original formula by creating these 2 game styles that work to achieve different goals. On one side, you have Dreamland 3 and the Crystal Shards, as they've created a tightly woven wordless story that's all built around this expansive gameplay based on ability combinations and a fully realized art style. With the Amazing Mirror and the gameplay takes center stage to achieve a kinetic flow so tightly tuned that I can't think of another series that rivals it in pure game feel. Somehow, this divergence doesn't muddy the stellar pedigree of the initial games, but creates a beautiful harmony between these 2 aspects that only serve to expand and improve the original formula. It's something that shows how much control these designers have over the series and their ability to build over the course of decades of work. So, do the Kirby sequels succeed? Well, my answer is... Woo! You thought I was gonna make a sequel to the Kirby video and not talk about Air Ride? You're out of your mind! This game is absolutely beautiful. You want to talk about game feel? Just look at how it moves. There's only 2 buttons for the whole experience, and it still demands your full attention to hit the boost and catch these power-ups. Each track is filled to the brim with new ideas soaring past your head, each one with their own distinct setting and course layout. Most of the time, you'll be neck and neck with your rivals and come down to the wire at the finish line. But that's only the races. Just wait until you see the crowning achievement of this game. City Trial. Hey, the goal is simple. You and 3 other contestants get 5 minutes to freely roam around the city and gather as many upgrades as you can. This is also your first real opportunity to try out all the different machines to figure out which one suits your mood. After this, you face off in a randomly chosen challenge to declare the winner. These tasks can be overall elimination, a target test, or a race. While I think this is a uniquely brilliant mode, I think the real masterpiece is the city itself. This whole area is impressively varied with different sections to explore and somehow seamlessly transitions from a metropolis to an active volcano. There's just so much here to get lost in, which is weird because it's not a particularly big map. Just tossing on free mode and changing out the machines to bounce around all the nooks of the city is worth trying for yourself. It is absolutely sublime. The only bad part about this game is that it makes it so hard to know that there isn't a mainline Kirby title for the GameCube. If you didn't think that those first few games succeeded in pushing the Kirby name forward, then Air Ride is the genuine proof of this beautiful series. Kirby's sequels are amazing, and they succeed with flying colors. I truly hope that you enjoyed these games and our time with them, because the next time we talk about this franchise, we're gonna address the 8-letter elephant in the room. Buckle up. There's a storm looming over Dreamland. So the last time I spoke about Kirby, I ended my video with this cliffhanger. I truly hope that you enjoyed these games and our time with them, because the next time we talk about this franchise, we're gonna address the 8-letter elephant in the room. Now, I know we're dealing with a slight delay on the content side, but there's a few reasons for that. The problem I had making this video was twofold. It's fun to praise a great game and poke fun at a bad one, but trying to prove the point that a game is generally disinteresting or treading old ground just ends up feeling really monotonous. Even so, I ended up writing a half-dozen scripts focused on Star Allies, to which I would inevitably abandon because, honestly, I just don't enjoy writing negatively unless there's a positive change we can look towards. When you look at the critical path the Little Pink Blob's been riding, you can see a disappointing cycle emerge. Instead of an incline or a decline in quality, it's been a circle. A sort of development loom that sews the thread of previous ideas and mechanics together in a fabric of forgetfulness, usually propped up with a gimmick to deceive you into thinking something new was finally going to happen. So, I didn't want to poke at the franchise. It's a terrible idea to push a series down when it might not get back up. I would much rather reflect on all the great experiences we used to have and cast a blind eye to the safe mundanity that our titular hero wallows within. That all changed last September. Out of nowhere, we saw the announcement of a brand new Kirby game. Not a remake, not a gimmick, not even a side-scroller. A fully realized 3D adventure. This was nothing short of enormous news. History shows HAL's wanted to make an open world type beat since the early aughts, but for one reason or another, they'd never been able to leave the pilot stage. And if that wasn't enough, we got a demo of this title weeks before it actually launches, and it's a pretty heavy showcase of what we can expect in the future. So because of this, I'm happy to take the gloves off. In this video, I will be going over the aspects of Star Allies I found lacking while seeing how Kirby and the Forgotten Land addresses these issues, while also looking at the new ideas this game brings to the table. I also have a little surprise near the end, but we'll get to that later. Now, before we jump in, I want to make two things clear, especially if you're watching this in the future. Star Allies is not a bad game, and I do not know if Forgotten Land is good. Kirby games, even at their lowest point, are still head and shoulders above most series, and as much as I've enjoyed Forgotten Land, it's still just a demo. I mean, what if it's like 2 hours long? That would be a major bummer. Most importantly, don't ask me what happened if this video turns out to be a pile of exaggerated nitpicks and unfounded speculation. I am just a dork that can't seem to stop talking about Kirby. Let's begin. So we'll start at the very beginning. Star Allies seems to stumble in its first impression. The user interface is a watered-down iteration of Smash Bros., where I would argue even in that game the options are obtusely designed. This is a common theme in the more recent Kirby menus, the strongest of which being Melee and Air Ride. Gee, I wonder why. I think the user experience is greatly improved in Forgotten Land, at least in this demo. Single or co-op, normal or easy. See, it's refreshing to see the difficulty option off the bat. I can already guarantee you that most of us will never know what this game is like on Spring Breeze, and it's nice to not have to wade through a river of milquetoast challenge to finally play the spicy version of the campaign. Also, this next point should be taken with a grain of salt as it really comes down to Star Allies being out for so long, but the second that you make a new save file, they just dump all the content updates and information on you. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's nice to see they added a lot of features post-launch, but I just started playing. Can you give me a second before you explain all these new characters I can try out? This is a running issue you'll see in Star Allies. Every single time there's any kind of information it feels like it needs to impart, the game will stop everything and throw a handful of dialogue boxes at you. And the worst part is you can't even spam past them. Most of the time the option to close the information is held off for a few seconds before they can let you move on. I understand there's an option to turn off the help and hints, but considering the fact that every single time you press a giant button, it feels the need to tell you that you've opened a new level, and it always comes across as unsure of its own design decisions. Forgotten Land solves this issue by having a less intrusive interface, but we'll get to that a little later. As far as the opening cutscenes go, I think these both look spectacular, but in regard to the narrative cohesion between the two, it's night and day. We're all familiar with the basic outline of a Kirby plot. Someone, somewhere is doing something bad. This awakens Kirby from their infinite slumber to wreak havoc upon all in their path. They teach this stuff in elementary schools. In Star Allies, we can see this outline, but everything is presented with too much content and too little context. We're talking about all these new characters wrapped up in untouched reasons behind why these hearts are here and why they're turning everything purple, and instead of hyping the player up to go on their great adventure, you're left either uncaring or decently confused. Now, this franchise has never been one to shy away from the more abstract elements. We can all expect the last level to get too real too fast, usually borderline Lovecraftian stuff, and at this point, it's a big part of the charm of these titles. I also get that a lot of the plot in this game is explained in pause menus and item descriptions. It all just makes for a story that's like a balloon strung together with twine, barely held together while somehow still feeling hollow. Forgotten Land nails that simplicity. The whole sequence sticks with Kirby's perspective, giving you this quick glimpse of the world in its natural, peaceful state that slowly integrates a brewing storm. You immediately see that the residents of Dreamland are being attacked as you are spirited away to another dimension. This is a textbook introduction. We have a conflict with the storm-threatening Dreamland, and we also have a goal of getting back to our homeland and saving the Waddle Dees and Doos and what have you. No matter where the narrative goes from this point, we can at least easily understand all the elements at play without the game needing to throw random story elements at us. Also, I couldn't find a better place to put this in the script, but Kirby's face in this shot is absolutely magical. I mean, mwah. When we look at the first level of Star Allies, you get this feeling like they took everything from the established Dreamland handbook. Gotta have green hills, gotta have upbeat music, gotta tell everyone how a Kirby game works for the millionth time. This is a preview for the next few levels to come in a not great way. I must have recorded dozens of hours of footage for this game, and I genuinely cannot tell you a single level that stood out to me. Not to say that there weren't elements that I enjoyed. This ball of Waddle Dees is cute, and having to escape the meltdown by traversing the level in reverse is cool, but the gameplay itself never seemed to amount to anything more than just going through the motions. Granted, I do think that one of the best aspects of playing a Kirby game comes from the mood it sets you in. There's a kinda low-gear, happy feel to your time playing most of these games. Real head-empty, big smiling hours. I just found most of the game would play it too safe, which made me feel like a passenger rather than the driver of the story. Forgotten Land does something remarkable with its introduction. Take a look at these first few levels in previous games. Upbeat and focused on going from left to right while trying to teach you a few things along the way. Now look at how this game starts. We begin on a shoreline facing the maw of a jungle. There's no music, minimal HUD, just a forced perspective of the only path we can take. From this path, we get a taste for the jungle landscape. The ambient sounds and the deep green palette immediately sold me on the tone this game can create. After that, we do get the usual introductory information, but it's all presented to the side, and it's set more like a checklist to make sure you're all caught up with the basics. These sparkling points remind me of the Koroks from Breath of the Wild, once again presented in an off-the-path fashion and expertly demonstrating that this game will have rewarding content for going off the main route. Of course, this is all just build-up to the grand reveal. It's hard to put into words how immaculate this is. In my first playthrough, I just had to stop and really take in everything this game was bringing to the table. The movement is so smooth and everything has this purposeful, solid feeling. It makes wandering around this new landscape an absolute joy. After completing your first open area exploration, you're met with a cutscene. It's here that we see the new mechanic that will become a staple of this game. Now, before we deliver the tofu, I wanted to touch on the staple mechanic of star allies. You know, the allies. So the big mix-up this game has is the addition of partners that can join you on your journey. Sure, you could have an ally all the way back in Superstar, but now you can have 3 of them, some of which are main plot characters with unique abilities. This mechanic introduces power fusions, so if you have the sword ability, you can now link up with your fire friend, bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself a fire sword. Using these dozens of combinations, you can tackle puzzles and build a team that covers all your adventuring needs. In theory, I don't have anything against this. It's fun to see all the different combinations and their effects. Seeing an interesting new enemy also has that Pokemon feeling where you get excited at the idea of adding them to your team. And a lot of the unique allies are throwbacks to fan favorite characters. Shout out to Rick Gang, I'm down till I die. In practice, this effect has a few major drawbacks. Having that many characters following your every move tends to make the screen extremely busy. Most boss fights boil down to button mashing because you have no idea what's going on. There are so many times that the game really wants to hammer home that the word ally is in the title, as you'll find multiple occasions where they just want you to split up and do teamwork sections. And at best, these are just diversions, and at worst, it really gives you those Daikatana vibes. And when it comes to the puzzle doors, I mean, sure, it's fun to see the fusion solution, but they either give you the enemies needed to make the combination, or they don't, and then you have to go and find the people necessary to finish the challenge, and both of these are not particularly fun. This also has a sister mechanic in the team up sections, and while the train and the glider can be really nice to switch up the pace, the wheel and the bridge generally feel like busy work. Okay, but finally moving back to Forgotten Land, this is the moment where they introduce Mouthful mode. Simply put, there are now inanimate objects in the world that Kirby can suck up, but instead of inheriting their abilities, you utilize that object however you see fit. So, less like Highlander, more like Mario Odyssey. This idea will either make or break based on how they implement it, but I mean, just look at this. A lot like Odyssey. Even though the controls are totally different, it still handles buttery smooth. Everything you get a hold of in this game is an absolute delight to mess around with. The car leads up to a battle royale, where we get a better idea of the enemies we're facing. Turns out it was birds and foxes. I always knew they'd come for us one day. From here you meet Elfalin, and hey, here's hoping we don't speak too often, you feel me? Nothing against you. I just respect my distance from dialogue boxes. In terms of general game feel and progression, we already know that this is something that Kirby games have nailed in the past. Every level transition felt snappy, with the worlds between them either having this quick door-to-door venture or a sweet little cutscene. Star allies can be straight up agonizing in this department. Let's say you finished a level and you want to jump to the next one. Simple stuff, right? Here is the unedited footage of beating a level and beginning the next one. Like I said, brutal. You may think that this isn't a big deal, but this happens every single time you beat any level, and honestly, it kills any momentum you might have had from the last stage. In Forgotten Land, you can see they've adopted that fluid interface model. The HUD is intermittent and they only show you information when it's necessary. I especially like these new objective trackers they've added. Not saying that adding side quests is always a good call. There's a real risk you run when you get too close to that Ubisoft objectification genre, but with a delicate hand it opens you up to all the additional things you can keep an eye out for, and it adds that much more engagement with the level. When it comes to actual gameplay, Star Allies has a few hangups that are hard to ignore. This game runs at 30 frames per second, which by itself isn't a big deal. Forgotten Land also runs at 30. I can totally understand that this comes down to a hardware limitation, and I would love to see both of these games running at that crisp 60 whenever they announce the Switch 2. Personally, I find that this capped frame rate really hurts a side-scroller far more than an open-world platformer. I imagine I could get used to this over time, but the game also runs at 60 whenever you're in menus or while you're doing a goal game. So you get a taste for what this game could be like for just a brief moment and then get hurled right back into the limited performance for the majority of your time. Honestly, this is more of a personal gripe for me. It's 2022, and I really don't think any game should natively run at 30 frames a second, unless it's a stylistic choice like in Sable. There's also control issues I kept running into. Kirby just refuses to dash most of the time, and it was always annoying to have to reset my thumb and then forcefully push left or right to get moving at that right speed. I also found that the different attacks from various abilities controlled in a pretty clunky way. I know the pause screen will always tell you the different abilities that you can use, but they were never intuitive. I would always have to consciously decide what move I wanted to do beforehand and then hope I executed it properly. Forgotten Land addresses this beautifully. Pushing all the way in any direction will always result in a dash, and I can't tell you why it works here and not in Allies, but I found it so much easier and rewarding to pull off combos. I mean, there's tech in this game, actual combo moves you can learn with every ability, especially when you start trying out those evolved powers. There also seems to be a sort of magnetization when it comes to your suck and blow technique, which I am all about. It always feels great hitting some dingus from a mile away. When it comes to level layouts, it really feels like Star Allies just forgot to have a direction in the art department. On one stage you will have ice, lava, beaches, just elements crammed together because people would be sad if we didn't see the environments that we're used to. Speaking of stages, they completely speedrun the normal Kirby curve. Happy grassland, spacey vibes, giant flying fortress, capping it off with even spacier vibes. I really missed the NES outing where you would end up in a zone and each door would at least attempt to keep everything in one theme. While I can't say for certain, it seems like Forgotten Land will be incorporating a hub world where you can slowly build up residents and gain new features as you play. While that's not a new concept for the gaming world as we know it, I am stoked to see how this franchise will interpret that progression with that incomparable Kirby polish. Okay, hear me out. I can't help but think a few of the new things we've seen in Forgotten Land have a striking resemblance to FromSoft features. Could it be that I'm just forcing connections because I'm absolutely obsessed with Elden Ring at the moment? Probably. See, we've always seen at least one of the cornerstones of Soulsy narration within Kirby, that being the story being on the sidelines and only truly revealed through descriptions and index pages. I imagine that these gacha prizes will do their fair share of storytelling once we get deeper into the career mode. This yak gave me big-time tree sentinel vibes, just an ominous waiting followed by a head-on rush to make you act on your toes. I mean, most of y'all don't even know that this guy is the easy version of the sentinel fight, but I'm not gonna spoil that one. Of course, the biggest connection is with this big boy here. Gorimondo is an excellent surprise ending for this demo. I mean, the way that they hint at his appearance at the beginning of the stage with the leaping shadow, and this prep room just before you see him is straight up out of a Souls game. There's this slow realization of what you're looking at while facing just a section of his back to him smashing through the window, and it's executed flawlessly. Without words, they've created a really intense setup and payoff to begin the battle. And this arena fight is such a beautiful example of how to make an exhilarating fight. It's a straight up Fog Gate death brawl, and I am here for it. These slow, exaggerated movements give you just enough time to telegraph what options you have to dodge his attacks, and the camera tracking is so extremely precise that it prevents any external frustration from the player's side. Also, have you seen the evolved version of the sword ability? Come on. Come on now. Most importantly, with a little practice you transition from just barely scraping by to absolutely dominating the flow of combat. And if that isn't a FromSoft mentality, I don't know what is. Look, I know comparing every game to Dark Souls is a tale as old as time, but it really showcases how Forgotten Land is taking leaps and bounds away from the established tradition of the franchise and creating something truly special. It is so nice to be able to feel excited for a new installment. No matter what happens, I know that Hal at least tried to make something truly special. And come to think about it, it's a kind of special experimentation that really marks the better aspects of modern Kirby. Yeah, so I think it's about time I told you I haven't truly painted the full picture of Star Allies, and it's about time that I put my cards on the table. While making this video, something really peculiar happened to me. This must have been the 6th time that I attempted to talk about how I feel about Star Allies, and each time I couldn't really find the words I wanted to say, at least in a manner I found worth projecting onto the internet. But once I was able to express everything that I felt was holding the series back, there was a sort of divine click. Maybe it's due to the promise of Forgotten Land's new ideas, or that I finally cleaned up the mess of thoughts swimming in my head, but what I was left with was something I never would have expected. Allow me just a moment to pull the curtain back. The title of this video was chosen very carefully. I often find myself making videos in the form of a question. Sure, that helps with engagement or whatever, but the main reason behind that is I can hopefully build a body of work that all coalesces in answering the question. This time, I did not have a question. See, when I say mediocre to masterful, I'm not saying that everything in Star Allies is mediocre and everything in Forgotten Land is masterful. Remember, Star Allies is not a bad game, and I do not know if Forgotten Land is a good one. You see, even with all the flaws, mundanity, and real drawbacks we see in Star Allies, the truth is there are a handful of elements that are pulled off in this game better than any other Kirby title. And I know, at this point, the people who love Star Allies have probably already left, but I would be remiss if I didn't give this game its flowers before it's cast beneath the shadow of Forgotten Land. We've fully gone over what I feel makes modern Kirby mediocre, so here's what makes Star Allies masterful. While the opening sections of this game have issues regarding tone and challenge, the second half of the story really picks up a lot of steam. This is interesting as most games in this series start with a great stride and generally use that momentum to carry to the finish line. Once you roll up to the far-flung galaxy, you definitely shake off a lot of that drudgery. Also, this game has the best background art in the series, like hands down. The aesthetic in this game is amazing. This snow section in particular has such an intense vibe, and all told, it makes this whole game a real joy to look at. That goes double for the music. Fully orchestrated with a heavy use of this original motif, they somehow found a way to utilize this progression in a way that perfectly fits with any tone. This is really prevalent when you see how creative they get with their musical choices. When you meet with Highness, they have this great use of prayer bowls or some sort of metal percussion that's both atmospheric and off-putting, perfectly capturing the Bad Priest sentiment. I also love the little jingle that plays whenever you encounter Meta Knight. There's something resigned and remorseful about it, like just the measure itself pokes at the long and complicated history we have with him. I also love the metal riff that they use when you go to the ultimate choice mode. It may not seem like a big deal, but giving the composer this amount of freedom to really flesh out the timbre of the game shows real care when it comes to our experience. And speaking of ultimate choice, this game has the best side content of any Kirby game. Off the bat, you get Chop Champ and Star Slam Heroes, both of which are fan favorites and look absolutely stunning. Though I do miss Samurai Showdown. After you beat the campaign, you get 3 additional modes, and Guest Star really shows off the attention to detail they put into every single character. They didn't just put the classic characters in this game as a fun nod. Every single appearance has been fully fleshed out, from the adapting actions of Rick, Kine, and Ku, the frightened yet determined Adeline, even the bumbling strength of Dedede. Even though I still don't like that they bombard you with all these characters addition at the beginning, I can totally see why. From their moveset to their idle animations, they all have been painstakingly crafted to represent their established personality. You really get a sense of how much they cared by the menu animations. There are dozens of these little encounters, and they all represent who each character is in one way or another. There's also 3 different versions of Wispy Woods, and you gotta love seeing them play around with some of Kirby's original designs. Out of these 3 new modes, my favorite is Heroes in Another Dimension. This isn't just recobbled content, it's a genuine new challenge that makes you utilize the different abilities and fusions, which makes for an incredibly engaging adventure. There's a ton of content here, to the point that completing all 3 of these modes is comparable to the actual story section with that same level of polish and charm. And finally, in my opinion, most importantly, the climax of the campaign is my favorite in the series. Spoiler warning, I guess, but once you meet with Highness, you realize that they've been manipulating the 3 generals, to the point that while fighting, they're frozen statues that he uses as weapons. Ultimately, the 4 foes are sacrificed to summon this game's version of the final boss that is really out of character compared to the rest of the game, Void Termina. Oh man, from the design aspect, this is amazing, like a colossal Majora cast to fight you and your friends. No anger, no malice, just an unfeeling, monstrous husk. This kicks into the classic genre switch-up we normally see, but this is by far the best implementation of that idea. The movement is so crisp, and charging your shots to fire down at the various weak points is an absolute blast. You'll eventually weaken Termina to the point that the mask will fall away, revealing that the name Void was extremely literal. You're sucked in to defeat what seems like the core of this mighty beast, only to be forced back out for the second phase. Now my man's got wings, turning this battle on its head with new verticality. They do some really interesting camera work here with the summoned attacks and the icy reflections, but this finally returns to another internal battle where we are met with the big reveal. It's Zero, or at least this world's version of the leader of dark matter. Personally, I think this boss is representing that the darkness we've been facing is an internal battle at its core. This is mainly represented by Void's choice to resemble both Zero and Kirby while continuing to remain formless and empty. Once you and your friends are expelled from the giant beast, you face off against the core of darkness directly. It's this moment where you summon the spirit of every single one of your friends to assist you in your final battle, and man, is this the content I am here for. We then have a beam-on-beam standoff. Honestly, this whole ending sequence reminds me of Wonderful 101 in the best way possible. I really wish more games asked me to mash the hell out of my controller. And suddenly, it's done. Kirby floats aimlessly through the galaxy until the shadow of home brings them to wake. From here, you saddle your star as your friends join you for the long trip home. You see, they didn't go for the big happy ending, but chose the subtle and loving piece to let you really reflect on the journey you've shared with your friends. And it's really this moment that made me remember what Kirby means to me. And, you know, on a personal level, I owe a lot to this franchise. The initial video I made on Kirby was the first time I truly tapped into an audience, and that video itself came from a real personal moment of reflection. All the frustration I was facing out in the real world pushed me to find a space where I could find real joy in my free time. Something that would spark that happiness in me and let me talk about a subject that really helped me through some dark times. The amazing thing about this really came from all of you. The outpour of support and similar passion for Kirby games, the feedback and encouragement I received from so many of you has been genuinely some of the greatest moments of my life, and for that I cannot thank you all enough. If you've made it this far in the video, I'm certain you understand how important and special these games truly are, modern, retro, whatever it may be. I don't think there's enough time in the world to really capture the magic we felt throughout the years, but there's one thing I know for certain. When sorrow shoots her darts, I can always rely on this tiny pink character to help me get to better times. With Forgotten Land just looming over the horizon, I know that Hal will continue to inspire and motivate all of us to experience all the good that life has to offer. So, you've made the world a better place with these games. Here's to another 30 years, Kirby. In the beginning, everything was new. Sights and wonders we could only dream of, sprawling adventures with the friends we made along the way, a voyage into a world we could never forget. We scaled from handhelds to consoles, from monochrome to the third dimension, all crafted around a handful of titles that are still considered the best of the best. But that's the thing about a beautiful beginning. Eventually, it has to end. As Superman once made way for Spider-Man, a golden age must drive forward for the sake of innovation. Anybody can rest on their laurels, but only a master can conquer the peak of a mountain, then continue climbing. Today, we will be tackling 3 games that lie smack dab in the middle of Kirby's career, the Silver Age of Innovation and the dark side of stagnation. This is the 4th part in my effort to cover every Kirby game, so if you're new here, howdy. You can check out the other videos right here or in the description. And while I plan on proving my through line here, I hope you can take this video as a chance to experience this brilliant era of Kirby with me, everything grand and what may lack in between. To get us started, let's show how much we've grown by returning to Dreamland. In the preparation for this video, I played just about all of the original release of this game, but it actually took me so long to get this done that they ended up publishing a remaster, so hey, sometimes procrastination pays off. The story kicks in with a cutscene, just as vibrant as we've seen in the past, but greatly improved by a nearly crayon-drawn aesthetic to set the tone as a faux fairy tale. Though I do think this border and papered finish really harms the overall feel. The fact that we don't get an unaltered version of these videos anywhere in the game is a bummer. As for the actual plot, instead of our usual bare-bones incentive, they throw an interesting curveball with this star-fallen ship. Visibly losing pieces in the crash, our main crew runs to help this space cadet. This is Magalore, and unfortunately, he's lost 5 critical flight components as well as 120 cogs for, I don't know, like a dozen clocks he has. We already know Kirby is all about helping out, dragging the pseudo-friend group along for a bizarre scavenger hunt. We make our first steps in Cookie Country. This first world is a perfect example of the mindset Return to Dreamland brings to the table. We're dealing with a Super Nintendo mentality at its very core, an ostensive 2-dimensional platformer that puts a heavy focus on your ability to traverse and pay attention to secrets. That being said, it's what they do with the newfound console's legroom that really makes the experience shine. The backgrounds are genuinely stunning. Giant windmill trees with Play-Doh mountains, underground routes that expel into giant caverns, cheese pillars, crystal caves. These are all elements we've seen before, but executed so smoothly and are simply a feast for the eyes. One thing we haven't seen are these super abilities. We're talking about the same bad guys we already love, but with an iridescent sheen. Sucking them up will trigger a fancy animation and a ridiculous rise in ability. Those little sword swipes, now you're looking at a screen-clearing cleave. Monster Flame can decimate a mighty oak, Beam pushes you to roll a death ball over everything you see. For a short time, these abilities hit the nitrous on your gameplay. Soon enough, you'll find that these extreme power fantasies will always lead to a dimensional rift, the same one our buddy Magalord just fell through. You ever play that one minigame in Smash Ultimate? It's like that, but with a beautiful punch to every detail. Each stage is personalized with a new challenge run, all set to the pounding threat of the Void Wall. For an admittedly simple game, it's ridiculously easy to get caught in an insta-kill here, but luckily, a well-placed shot can pause the death barrier for a brief moment. After that scramble, you'll prep for a mini-boss. It may seem like a pushover at first, but as we unravel this entry, the enemies grow right alongside with us. Every time you dab on a Doom Hunter, you get a tomato and then spat right back out to the mainland, generally just next to the victory door. It wouldn't be a mainline Kirby title without a goal game. Luckily, the trampoline flashes once you're at the apex of power, so with a little practice, you can crush this consistently. We wrap up this zone with a fight against Wispy, which is another great example of how much has changed. You begin identically to the previous encounters, but halfway through, the old tree grows enormous and begins stealing our moves. Luckily, he's still just a tree, so the showdown is over in no time. With the ores secured, we make our way to the Raisin Ruins. Off the bat, this may be my favorite sand area, not just in Kirby, but in general. Take that, Mario 3. We saw the geometric desert idea in a handful of previous games, but Return to Dreamland has the smoothest balance of both elements. The geysers blasting shapes in the background, the stonework enemies, you can even see the pyramid we're about to ascend. While cruising on these sand dunes, you'll notice that this game absolutely nails that feeling of momentum. Just off these few desert levels, you climb atop these hills, descend an Indiana Jones section, all the while the background ruins grow ever closer. But before you actually enter the ruins, you get this refreshing oasis section, combining the slick water ability in tandem with the sandy shores. All this nice sliding landscape culminates to the actual temple we've seen, switching our journey to an ascent. While brief, these levels pack a lot of variety, cramped innards to external scaling, all the while dodging massive cannons in an effort to enter the boss's domain, a spooky melting candle excursion brilliantly set against this Invisagem exercise, until we finally meet him. This boss is mid, and I'm sorry to say that for the most part that will be the norm in this game. Visually, it's wonderful to see the new designs with this genie mixing up new attacks, but the actual final bosses in most of these zones are not something you'll look back on fondly. With the right wing in the bag, we swim on down to the Onion Ocean. Thank God somebody figured out that a good water zone requires about half of the content to be beach-based to level it out. That unique momentum carries over to this area, cascading down a tropical mountain, sinking deeper and deeper into these crystallized corridors. It's here that the enemy variety starts heating up. You don't have nearly as much control in the water, and the Barracudas certainly know that. Also, there's this mech power-up, which is just wild. Who would have thought they'd incorporate robotics in the series? But they won't do that again. We also see the return of the spear copy, which is a perfect example of the detailed combat in this game. Every ability makes a return, as well as a few new ones. The main difference here is how intricate they are. In the past, I've found myself defaulting towards the most straightforward attacks. Most of my OG playthroughs can be summed up by dashing Y, and I don't think I'm the only one guilty of that. Luckily, pausing the game gives a full ability rundown. So many little moves I never would have found on my own that can change a power-up from trash to godlike. Big shoutouts to Sand in that regard. I totally understand that the SNES games also had these instructions, but Return to Dreamland has the benefit of far more screen real estate, leading to intricate enemy placements that lend themselves beautifully to each specific attack. They handle the scarcity of better abilities masterfully. You don't stumble onto Hammer out of the blue. That's gonna cost a mini-boss or a hidden hallway to get your hands on. In the same way, they do everything they possibly can to constantly switch up your ammunition, leaving you with an extremely varied experience no matter your preference, always tested by the sphere doomers that grow stronger with each encounter. I never would have thought bouncing in a boot would be so entertainingly difficult, but paired with this wonderful cyan reef, it might just be the best highlight of Onion Ocean. Again, take that, Mario 3. I love these big vertical choice puzzles, especially with the Riptide making you go slightly faster than you're comfortable with. Unfortunately, I was not smart enough to know how to solve these until editing this part of the video, but hey, I'm doing my best. Look at how this octopus dies. Kirby's out here claiming souls. You gotta love the penultimate level's atmosphere. It's cramped and full of moving, spiky bits, but with the shimmering water and mellow colors, it all feels strangely cozy, like the Zora's Domain, or being trapped in a bathtub. Our final boss is a pufferfish that goes ridiculously hard. This cannonball run and Kamehameha is entirely beyond my ability to dodge, but we managed to slip through. With the other wing in the bag, let's split from the main game and talk about a few side attractions. Heading into Magolor's ship offers many distractions, some of which are exceptional. To the right, you have a handful of combat challenges, paced out perfectly with the required cogs to access them. They offer a really fun way to learn the ins and outs of each ability, all set to these colorful blocks and logs. To the left, you can dip into a few ability rooms, set in 5 tiers and perfect for testing out on this creepy dummy dude. Though I find this cramped area somewhat unhelpful with how these attacks would work in-game, as most of the time you'll be sparring out in the open. And below deck, we have the meat of the additional content, the minigames. We all know the classics. Samurai Kirby is still an all-time favorite. Egg Catcher is a great time killer. It's awesome to see how they remade the wrestling ring from Adventure. I really don't like this. Whatever's happening here, stop. Ninja Dojo is super simple. Just click at the right time. It's the presentation and the playful distractions that make it one of my favorite solo games. But we all know the single-player games pale in comparison to the party titles, and for that, let's check out one of the new additions to this remake. Early on in the story, you'll find this peddler Waddle Dee. They invite you to a mystical world protected by the Star Wars plot armor that detaches it from the mainline story. Welcome to Merry Magoland, brought to you in a cinematic 30 frames a second. Luckily, the games are still buttery smooth. Here is your hub for the greatest multiplayer hits. You got your bomb toss, bumper cars, and you already know Crackety Hack makes an appearance. In full honesty, these games felt a little too familiar, and after checking back on Magolor's ship, yeah, they're just the exact same from the original game, which threw me off at first because that feels really redundant. But the more I dived into the games, the more sense it started to make. This whole area is not an effort for new content, but a way to present it with a full-fledged reward system that is hardwired to the internet. Speaking with the Souvenir D again allows you to see the new masks you can collect. Clicking down on the right analog stick lets you put it on at any point here and in the main story. I mean, it's a nice addition, but I can't really see myself jumping at the opportunity to wear any of these. Maybe if you just wanted to flex. By completing events, you can fill in these stamps, unlocking a large variety of power-ups you can take with you and use whenever you're in a pinch, which is kind of never. Death is more of a random inconvenience. Of course, Magolor is here representing the management of the establishment. They'll cue you in on a few global facts about the game, which undoubtedly are going to be astronomical. Sticking with a minigame for long enough will actually let you tap into some of these statistics in real time. After a few games of Samurai Kirby, you can join a Battle Royale. This takes the single button fun of this game and pairs you against 99 other people to see who has the freshest brain. It's great that you can only play it once a day, adding a spicy weight to your attempt. Minigames have always been a fun addition to these titles, and Deluxe has really taken the horsepower needed to stand beside the party titles that we all know and love, at least for a couple of minutes. Once the party dies down and you're back home with that classic dehydrated headache, you'll be all set to jump back into the story and tackle the snow zone. Snow areas in Kirby games are always so serene, and White Wafers is no different. In an effort to avoid annoying ice physics, you'll mostly spend your time slipping through mounds of snow and traversing igloos. We'll see the fighter and ninja abilities are heavily favored here, which are some of the more fun movement options in the game. Pair that with a cannonball run and you get the feeling that they did everything they could to make this area intrinsically fun to get through rather than annoying. Below the surface, you'll find a pseudo-cave section with an old-fashioned rock slide. This comes to a frenzy when you find the first super hammer. This attack may be more fashion than function, but it certainly feels just right. I've always loved these windsurfing levels, beautifully casting against the purple sunset and icicle corkscrews in the background. You do a little bowling, crack through a puzzle level, crawl through the darkness, then you're ready to fight the boss. I'm actually happy to report that this fight is tricky enough to be my first combat death, but nothing a little sand cheese can't fix. Now that we have the ship's emblem back, which strikes me as an aesthetic addition, so I'm not sure why it's only one piece stands between us finally saving our shipwrecked buddy. Nutty Noon, the first location that's named temporally and not geographically. Super nice touch with the first level being set against the original world's background and ascending to the sky, settling into a cloudy beanstalk area. Welcome to the summit. This is the part of the game where you climb to the very apex of the big bad castle. You'll face devious death zones, tricky traps, and one enemy that looks like that guy from Smiling Friends. This is the first time you'll get to work with the bird ability, which is an absolute treat. The fine-tuned flying mechanics are paired perfectly with the mini wind tunnels you'll face. This is always right around when I start really loving the gameplay of a Kirby game. They finally start bumping up the BPM of challenge to a perfect rhythm, even setting up these moments where if you aren't acting quick enough, you'll miss out on collectibles. Once you tap into level 2, you get that pristine rolling sunset. Like before, it's a perfect case of redefining segments we've seen in the past with a much grander scale. Though these lever puzzles are a little silly. I get the idea is if you pick wrong, you release some bad dudes, but that's not really a problem, you know? They do take the appropriate time to make this castle feel imposing, even going into the clouds above to add this elevated tone of grandeur. Except for this cog. This might be the worst hidden collectible I've ever seen. You can always tell you're approaching the end once the landscape starts squashing you. A part of me wishes that Death in the Rift would have you miss out on your chance with the Doomer, but I could see that would get wildly annoying for a completionist. Level 5 presents our first gauntlet, and I somehow began with half a health bar. I ain't taking no tomatoes. Only pushing through 4 fights makes this quick and easy, ending with our first encounter with an electric heavy. Y'all already know how I feel about easy boss rushing, so I'll just say it's nice that they made sure each battle has a hard suggestion to change your fighting style, leading to great variety and another chance to sharpen your skills. Finally, the boss room opens, but luckily, it looks like the last piece is completely unguarded. Why, you think they were just gonna give it to you? You just came from this room. Anytime you see a room like this, you know you're in for a hurtin'. This is the Grand Doomer, a genuinely ridiculous fight. It's somewhat reminiscent of Mark's with the teleportation and the foreground attacks. I actually get completely bodied in my first attempt, but you already know I'm busting out the pocket sand. Refilling their health bar near the end, they make your normal attacks useless, warping enemies in for the assist. But this dingus brought in a super swordsman. Absolute clown maneuver. Once you land the final blow, the animation switches up. They know you just nailed it, and they're hyping you up to celebrate. The mast is yours, you return to Magalore, and we all set sail into the sky. A job well done. Yeah, this story ain't over. The completion percent is like half filled, and I haven't missed a cog yet. During our visit to Magalore's home world, Halakandra, we are attacked by a Hydra.
Oh, I just fixed that!
Unfortunately, we're shipwrecked again. And my controller's about to die. They've gone all out with a brand new overworld, completely changing the tone of the resting area and throwing our preconceived story right out the window. Our first stop in this strange world is the mechanical minefield of egg engines. If I had to describe this first level in one word, it would be cramped, and I am all about it. Having an infinite jump doesn't do you much good when you're jammed between steel, especially when you're lost in the dark. The cannon section presents crushers with little gears for eyes. It's like they feel awkward for crunching ya. Even the water areas have this mechanical touch, which is gross, but in a whole new way. Conveyor belts are going at Mach speed. Victory and failure race across a razor's edge as you do everything you can to keep pushing forward. Heavy eggship vibes. Which makes it all the more disappointing that the boss of this place is just a robot, like a small one. Outside of the fact that your damage is shown on each hit, it's probably the most forgettable boss, especially as this is the only stage boss that doesn't have any item or plot progression tied to their defeat. Time to roll up your sleeves. This is our last world, Dangerous Dinner. This is a great example of why I love a good lava world, filled to the brim with challenge and traversal, all cutting against the forces of magma tides and spewing eruptions. They use the snow ability to great effect here. Not only can you mitigate the lava for some collectibles, but the super attack has you knocking out molten bowling pins. All of this, they're just features of the outskirts. You'll enter a volcano and descend the mighty passage while narrowly avoiding boulders and bad guys. This candle section is so intense, perfectly capturing that fear of deep, unclear water. They actually get a little clever with the Grand Hammer section, needing you to choose the correct power to line up these wires. I often find myself playing these games with my brain completely switched off, and something like this jolts me back into the present moment. They certainly do not mess around with the rifts anymore. The window is super tight, and they'll put you in places to catch you off guard with the moving terrain. Getting back outside has you dash through a meteorite attack, dodging miniature suns, and capping off with you literally cutting a volcano in half. The feels in this game, those are immaculate. At last, we finally meet with the mighty dragon. It feels a little cheap to go with sand again, so now's the perfect time to test my bomb tossing. Landia starts off as a bit of a pushover until it's revealed that this ain't no dragon, it's dragons. This may just be me here, but I definitely feel worse about beating up 4 little dudes, but before you know it, the battle is over. With the threat defeated, Magalore reappears to congratulate us while taking the fallen crown. Okay, let's be honest here. Who here didn't think that Magalore was gonna be the bad guy? After Marks and Dynablade, I think we're all a little suspicious about overly nice strangers and seemingly bad animal. You'd be a fool to bet otherwise. You don't even make up with Landia. Dude just walks up behind you and nabs your head. It's like, yeah, we gotta go do the flight section of the Kirby game. This whole part has some of my favorite atmosphere in this game, the cool blue and purple searing against the liquid orange. The bullets come fast and the space is minimal. We gotta be careful as we only have 100 chances at this. You never know. Once we meet with Magalore, we face off against the lore. Every attack is based on the same items we spent the majority of our time collecting. After some tense dogfighting, you're struck to a local planet, ready to bring the battle to the ground. You always have to try these roulette abilities. You never know, you might get a hammer. We are finally at the final fight, and they did not hold back. Teleportation, flying projectiles, Kamehamehas, galactic whirlpools, the gang's all here. Like the Doomer, you'll reach a point where you must grab a guy to do a super move. Unfortunately, I get Bloodborne, so I have to try again. You would think this enormous button mashing segment would put a pin in the fight, but we've only just unlocked his final form, which, for me, makes this fight completely unfeasible on half a health bar. Hey, looks like we win! After all the crap we had to go through fixing a ship and beating up weird dudes and getting sent to a lava planet, finally finishing this fight is so cathartic. Give me back my hammer! Die! In an uncharacteristic move, there's no retribution for Magalor. His dark power fades away with the shattering of his planet, and the very ship we fixed comes to us by its own will, offering salvation. We ride with Landia one last time to return back home, all our friends safe and sound, sending the ship and the rulers of Halcandra home with a fond farewell. Man, that honestly wasn't a lot of game. For a casual 100% playthrough, it clocked in at just around 9 hours. It feels like they also knew that, as sitting through the credits doesn't end with a thank you, but there's more! So, a finished game gives you 3 new modes. First up, we have Extra. Same game with the dial turned up. They actually went out of their way to add a good bit of little details here. Each collectible is slightly changed with the hollow stars and the crowned lives. You get way less health, which is bad news with the new enemies and some bosses getting the EX moniker. I know there's a new cutscene for Magalor as well, but I just can't be asked to beat this whole thing again right now. Maybe later, maybe streaming it, who knows. As a staple of the franchise, we also unlock an arena mode, although this one is super bare bones. A series of 13 fights, the first 10 of which are in random order and the last 3 will always be the ultimate battle we just went through. They load you up with 5 tomatoes and 4 oranges, so catching a W is no major feat. Victory will get you the option to do it all again, but with 3 auxiliary buddies, which, I mean, I don't want to come across as a spoiled baby, but that's pretty uneventful. Normally, the arena is a haven for post-game content, a real white-knuckle event where you have to really plan out your abilities and debate on when you should heal. Unless I'm missing something, I couldn't imagine anyone doing this more than a handful of times. If we were playing the original release of this game, that would be all she wrote, a real contender for the not really worth $50 category. Luckily, I paid $60 so we get this snazzy little epilogue from Magalor. Not only are we going to get the redemption of our villain we missed out on in the main game, but would you believe me if I told you this was the best part of Return to Dreamland? Usually with these remastered editions, you'd be looking at a texture swap with 0 budget, more of a blurb on the box than anything substantial. But this is Nintendo we're talking about. We may not get any deals, but we're certainly getting quality. After our battle, Magalor was cast into the dimensional ether, embedded deep between the walls of reality. You can tell because he's black and white now. My man got beat so bad that he's back to square one, only left with a tiny jump and a pathetic attack. Our simple quest is to gather our abilities once again. At the end of every major level, you'll find a forbidden taco, lighting a fire to bring us back to 100%. And as basic as that sounds, it is so much fun to progress in this mode, taking the smooth and natural gameplay that we're used to and fusing it with long-term progression. You get this beautiful mixture of high-speed combat with a hit counter like Devil May Cry, and the better you do, the more points you earn towards upgrading your abilities, only making the combat loop that much more satisfying. Each slice you get gives you a major upgrade and lets you progress like a Metroidvania. It all comes across like the remastering team was allowed to do whatever they wanted for this additional content and just tugged at the threads of their favorite games. Not to mention all the new landscapes they've designed, taking inspiration from the Rift levels and adding further complexity with these color palettes and the newfound surreal design of the platforming. By far the most interesting environments we've seen in this game. The bosses are remixed into new trans-dimensional forms, and boy, they did not hold back on the combat. If you haven't been choosing your abilities wisely, you will get mopped without mercy. They make sure you're really understanding the new attacks by forcing you to use them in progression, as well as offering loads of magic points in the optional challenge rifts, striking a perfect balance in combat and puzzle levels. In the span of 2 hours, you'll be able to create the party platter needed to awaken the hidden truth. This ain't no fiesta. It's an Applecalypse. I'm sorry, turn it off. Turn the video off. As a welcome surprise, we get an all-new final boss. And just look at the scale of this. We get this beautiful and threatening fight against the Master Crown, a jewel-encrusted Technicolor giving tree, shooting lasers and roots with reckless abandon. After you do enough damage, the dude just body slams you into oblivion. No matter how many upgrades you get, this fight is going to test everything you have. But with enough persistence, you will fell the mighty tree, summoning the same sword Kirby used to defeat you to finally redeem yourself through astrological woodcutting techniques. A new portal opens, and we hop through, leaving the misdeeds behind to start a new beginning. Return to Dreamland sits in a strange place for me. There's definitely a lot to love. You start to see the devs stretch their legs to capitalize on the visual elements that originally made the 2D titles so great. But at the same time, when it comes to the combat, bosses, settings, a lot of the main pillars of this title, I can't help but notice this overwhelming sense that they're tired of the formula. Who could blame them? After so many bangers on every Nintendo console that matters, you would start to feel the development cage, and with the actual talent at work stuck with the standard story and basic mechanics with only a handful of options to innovate, you would hope they would get more room to creatively flesh out a new adventure. Luckily for us, we still have 2 games to talk about, sister titles from one of the most creatively innovative consoles Nintendo ever released. First up, let's talk about Triple Deluxe. Off the bat, they immediately surpass the open simplicity of the original titles. Falling asleep allows this strange vine to intrude Dreamland, leading to this ridiculously armed bug thing to straight up steal King Dedede. We should all know the green grass openers by now, but they strongly play with the plant-based environments. Pair that with a heavy emphasis on 3D and you get these awesomely dynamic areas to explore. Simplified from Return to Dreamland, it doesn't pretend to approach the combat or movement with any new features, choosing instead to focus on the new Hypernova mechanic. They are not playing around with the animation in this game. Look at how they frame the camera in these super-powered moments. There's a brilliant feeling of weight behind each approach that gives the whole walk a deeply satisfying feel. You'll even notice this in the transitions. Climbing on the star for the first time has this waiting period where everything powers up, like an old car you loved to death roaring to life once again. The big collectible this time are the Sunstones, which you'll need to access the bosses and a few extra levels. You'll also find keychains for, I guess, the same reasons you would get keychains in real life. The first level ends with a battle against multiple moles, then you get your bonus game. Genuinely the tightest window for this bonus I have ever seen, just 2 frames to get to the furthest platform, and you actually get a collectible for it. Honestly, my favorite minigame so far. The skill ceiling is perfectly high. The one thing I definitely don't love is all the tilt controls. Whole lot of fun trying to wrangle this in with this extremely real 3DS I'm playing on.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
The name of the game is 3D, literally and figuratively. I was never a huge fan of gimmicky games on this console, but they really seem to take to the improvements this creativity can offer, and it really shows. These opening levels trade in the traditional grassy plains for a strong jungle vibe, using the handheld's display for their advantage by tightening the scope to look like a pop-up book. In general, every level can be broken into 2 playable planes, separated by a smaller star to transition between them. This works beautifully with the revamped enemies for these brain-twisting high-octane encounters. World 1 ends with our favorite tree, but I am happy to report that they have completely overhauled the boss encounters in this game. At the beginning of the stage, we can see the mysterious villain just straight up still stealing our main man. Getting too close results in them transforming a flower into a mainstay encounter. Due to our current fertile fiasco, Wispy Woods has transformed into a powerful, flowery foe. Instead of the regular face melting we're used to, this fight is extremely dynamic with multiple phases and the sweeping root attack, making for an engaging and beautifully colorful experience. Victory ensures us a giant medallion, pushing the vines beneath to a new stage. You can tell they truly wanted to break away from the standard landscape progression by introducing this candy-covered arena. Normally, I would say a World of Desserts is annoyingly quirky, but they immediately hit the ground running with great ideas. You spend your opening section dodging this gumball tank, followed up by exploring a confection factory. This progression caps off with a great callback when pulling a wallpaper to reveal the OG level layout. Oddly enough, they transition from a production line to a carnival, introducing what has to be the strangest copy ability to date, Circus. They brought 4 new abilities to the table this time around. Circus is basically clown mode, making balloons and jumping through hoops. Archer is like a slower but stronger ninja, Bell is a new area of denial attack, and Beetle turns you into a beetle. Out of the 4, I found the most use out of Bell. The Y-spam move is consistently amazing, and a dashing attack results in an ultra-satisfying screen sweep. As for the classic attacks, they did a great job balancing across the board. You really can't go wrong with any ability, especially considering that any decent damage is gonna knock that star square out of you, scrambling your tactics and forcing you to try and retain your firepower. This balance, of course, does not include Hammer. It's by far the strongest attack, and considering it's up Y, can light ropes, and downswing can pound pegs, you don't have many cases where you wouldn't keep it. Series-wide, it is by far my favorite ability. Fun fact, that rope on Kirby's head is called an Obijima headband. You would generally use these to hold up the sash on a happy kimono. Mario wears the full festival outfit as one of the final costumes in Odyssey. Fighting through factories and carnivals alike leads us to Paintra, a new addition to the bad guy crew. Utilizing that old school paintings becoming enemies approach, the added dimensionality really makes this fight a spectacle. I love how they play with the brushes to obscure the screen, then turning the entire background into a canvas for a surprise attack. We even get a callback to Landia in the final phase. With the new path open, we begin Old Odyssey to continue our quest. In a surprising twist, this may be the first zone I can't see any discernible through line. Outside of being mostly comprised of canyons and ruins, there's no real theme or location to draw comparison, which I'm stoked to see. There's a real feeling of free-form creativity here. You dodge trains adorned with Waddle Dee's face, fighting big-ass birds with turnips, then begin climbing through a twilight mountainside into an ice-crusted field. Really a grab bag of ideas in the best kind of way. I always find this kind of creativity when Kirby is firing on all cylinders. It's the purest form of anything goes and shows a great deal of confidence in their original work, especially when they cut away from the tried and true methods of the past. When you're barreling through random landscapes as a clown fighting paintbrushes and listening to a strange mixture of upbeat jazz and drum and bass, you no longer compare the title to any Mario or Donkey Kong parallel. You are simply left with an unmistakably Kirby vibe. Just looking at this level preview gives away that the boss is going to be a banger. There's never been a bad Krakow fight, and it certainly doesn't start here. I love that these callback fights always begin with the original moveset from the old games, but near the middle they expand into this deeply complex arrangement, almost like this is always how the fight was supposed to feel, and they finally have the tech to make it so. There's a mechanic in this game where Bandana D will toss you a health pickup that you can store for later, the quality of which is based on how many friends you have on Street Pass. Rest in peace. At first, I didn't want to use it as I felt it was too strong of a benefit against the challenge, but they genuinely throw some major heat around this point. You'll find my resolve in this abstinence does not last much longer. We make slow work of this angry cloud and head on over to the wild world. We open with a blooming Aztec layout. It reminds me of the overgrown facility in Metroid Fusion, another game I'ma go over one of these days. They play with water in a really refreshing way, pairing extremely well with the tight wind tunnels as a fine replacement of a dedicated water world. Though this tropical setting quickly falls to the wayside by immediately turning into a haunted mansion type deal, which is definitely weird, but man, do they bring it with the content. It's all a trick of the mirrors, using the background to see where pitfalls or blocked passages lie, finally stumbling across a hypernova fruit so you can wreck a few nights. They even pull the fake-out end door to call back to haunted furniture, genuinely running circles around any boo house I've seen. While the 3DS isn't the most graphically blessed device, something about pulling the curtain on this room and beaming the sunset across the walls is just overwhelmingly pleasant. The second half of the zone is dedicated to this golden temple, filled with sand traps and laser snakes. Once you actually roll to the end, you face an enormous cobra built across broken pillars. Overall, this area is a perfect stepping stone into the mid-game. Though it's definitely difficult to hype up this section once you know the next zone is titled Endless Explosions. Once again, we ascend to the top of a volcano, finally facing the elemental challenge of magma and the raging heat of difficulty inclination. The beautiful mixture of burning reds meeting the cool purple surface of the earthy ground. It all makes for a thick mixing of cautious speed and forethought with your abilities. Though this mostly breaks down to hold on to ice for as long as you can or you're gonna miss out on secrets, bud. You wouldn't expect to have swimming sections in a zone like this, but you can't get enough of these big biting sewer dudes. I did find this one minigame room where I imagine there's an easier way to get it accomplished, but hot damn does it feel good to execute these maneuvers. This part also includes one of my favorite uses of the Hypernova, sucking up these comically long serpents and the little interactions you see with the Waddle Dees in the background. Finishing up with a shielded dragon crew climaxing with an eruption sadly marks the end of what I found to be a great progression to this game. From here, you do a mini boss rush, ending with a fight against a fiery frog, opening up the final path to Royal Road. The final mainline stage is unmistakably forgettable. For a 6-hour game, it feels like a real shame to fill the final hour with reused tilt mechanics, background attackers, a boss rush, and a straight-up reincorporation of every Hypernova section we just did. Granted, I know returning to old lands and battles is a staple in any Kirby game, but in this case it feels far less than a triumphant return to heighten the final battle, and much more like they needed some serious filler to flesh out the playtime. But getting through this opens up to what I can only describe as, oh no, we forgot to tell the story, in which they dump the entirety of the plot in the last 3 levels. This starts with these woodland fairies. Busting them out of cages opens all the doors needed to progress within the sparkling crystal landscape that is admittedly gorgeous. This place also includes the most annoying tilting game I have seen to this point, so much so that I ain't gonna do it. We get our beautiful return to malicious crushing machinery, so you know we're almost done. We hit a ridiculous hypernova that brings us to our last boss return, where in one fell suck, we absolutely demolish the revamped tree. Once I saw that health bar also get pulled into the vortex, I absolutely popped off. We've regained the footing to finally face the fierce flowery foe to right. Yeah, the Sunstones. Looks like I'm doing that minigame. At least this will be the end of my emulation controlling woes, right? Is that music? Why would there be music? Rolling into the castle reveals Tarzana, a bug wizard with the power to puppeteer. Turns out they were looking to steal the hero of the lower world, thinking it must be King Dedede. In this moment they return the fallen king to us, but with wicked webs clouding his mind. We haven't spoken on Superstar Ultra yet, but the quick inside knowledge here is you do not mess with Masked Dedede. This is an absolute grudge match against one of the best characters in the series with undeniably one of the greatest songs in the franchise. A final blow frees him from the control of Tarzana, revealing the final boss of our quest. Ironically, the puppeteer wizard was just a puppet in the twisted scheme of Sectonia, the vile queen bee of the heavens. This fight is mid, but we all know they aren't just gonna hit us with a single phase, not this deep in the series. Seemingly victorious, we reunite with the king to realize that whole fight was just a warm-up. Turns out we're the hero of the low world. Gee, no kidding. Now we gotta go to the Bloom of the Dreamstalk to finish the fight. For real this time. But first, let me break this down for you. In this section, we gotta break these bulbs to open the vines to shoot ourselves to the boss fight. On console, this is light work. Put it up to your face and shoot it like a scope. Easy peasy. In the process of filming this section, I cannot tell you how nerve-wracking it was trying not to mess this up. The controls are inverted in the most disorienting way, and each missed shot takes a chip of your life. If you haven't noticed, I'm not that particularly healthy. This, by no means, is a point away from the game, but from my experience, this very stupid perspective of mine, just trying to get to the final bit and being tested in a way I could only describe as hellishly stressful, is just another place this massive franchise has mentally transported me. It's time to end this. Okay, now it's time to end this. These games never seem to fail when it comes to the climax. Sectonia has morphed into the blooming Dreamstalk, creating this unbelievably powerful beast of ethereal power. As for the actual fight, it's mostly dealing with these 4 dinguses. With the gaps in the platforms, you can guarantee you'll be losing whatever power-up you bring. That's not a problem. By this point, you should be extremely familiar with the suck and blow technique and can get through any hardship using the Dust Stars. It won't be easy, but nothing worth doing is. Eventually, you will taste victory. But it's really not, though. Luckily, Tarzana is on our side now, and Dedede knocks us out. Yikes, dude. Thinking quickly, he tosses us into a hyperfruit, allowing Kirby the proper power to finish this whole ordeal. While the Queen puts up a grand fight with their buddies in enormous shield, we pick away at them like a spider picking apart their prey, which leads to, without assistance, we meet for one last collision, pulling in every ounce of their powerful attack,
sucking without mercy all of their being, and for the first time in the franchise, a frown! The vine vanishes, the fairies take us home, we got a new friend, and the dreamstalk meets a beautiful bloom. Of course, this means there's an arena, but better than that is Kirby Fighters. This is a slick multiplayer mode where you can test pure Kirby mechanics in a straight-up brawl. If you bump up the difficulty, you realize just how insane the tech can get. See, I knew about DDD's Drum Dash beforehand, and I was stoked about trying it out. And as cool as it is to try a rhythm game, this mode is unforgiving when it comes to hit zones and timing. If you were looking for content featuring the OG Penguin, then DDD's Tour is where it's at. Taking full advantage of the campaign, you can embark on a new spin of the content, a speed run to tackle these levels as the big man himself, fully decked out with all the hammer moves. This takes such a beautiful cue from Return to Dreamland with the hard mode and gives you the ability to dive right back in with a refreshing twist. Looking at all these nice additions on top of the effort to 100%, what more could you ask for? A lot, actually. Look, if you were looking for the classic Kirby vibes, you got it here. The thing is that we still have classic Kirby titles. And what we gained in graphical presentation, I can't help but feel the sense of treading old roads based on the fact that they know you don't need to fix what isn't broken. Wouldn't you see the super abilities and the hypernovas only being used at specific times in certain levels to do tiny tasks that always boil down to the same outcome as a gimmick? Couldn't you see the wide world of new portables and consoles and the backing of so many talented creators approaching this series with the same stock standard level layouts and by the numbers approach to bosses and traversals as a genuine shame? What is the point of breaking the box open if you're just gonna grab the same tools? Why must this Silver Age be nothing more than a shadow of the glory we've already seen? Can this truly be the future of the franchise? Will we ever see this team truly spread their wings and do something, anything remarkable? I'm gonna be honest with you. This game is the entire reason I wanted to make this video. 2 years after Triple Deluxe and nearly 20 years after Superstar, HAL released Planet Robobot. And to this day, we have not seen a game in the main series with more originality and creativity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go over introductions. Planet Popstar is met with a looming threat in the form of an enormous UFO. Our main cast is completely stunned as the vessel docks, planting these wicked bulbs in the surface. If only Kirby could even slightly care. Our journey begins in the strange new world around us, ready to complain to our new neighbors. This game has the same bones as Triple Deluxe. Your jumping, dashing, and abilities will feel right at home if you've dabbled in either of the previous games. Sunstones are replaced with code cubes, keychains are replaced with stickers, and the bonus game is straight up the same scenario with a kick in the visual pants. It's really what they do past these basic mechanics that have this title standing head and shoulders above the competition. Off the bat, you can see the revamped vision up front in the background. The entire green grass motif is completely reworked into this metallic landscape, giving us a chance to see the electronic trees poking from the outside. Every enemy has taken this opportunity to rework their approach, Waddle Dees taking mechanical rides and Scarfies that fully embrace the cybernetic overhaul. Blowing convention away, we face off with Wispy in the very first level. Even the enemies are terrified, as they totally should be. This is less a battle and more an escape. The old tree having this terrifying metal makeover clearly sets the tone that this fight isn't going to play out as we've seen before, not without some serious help. After stumbling across a flying death squad, we are able to defeat an invader to acquire some mechanical help of our own. Just look at this cutscene. Pair that with the pumped up jams in the background and you might get a sliver of how awesome these sections feel. The insane boost in power, the smooth robotic glide of our mech. Outside of a loss to jumping and tight space maneuvering, this is a flat out upgrade. While mid-level power pushes are nothing new to this trifecta, it's the delivery that makes all the difference. Before, you would be set in a small area to express this overpowered ability, generally with a pre-planned set of things to do that culminate with a collectible. Robobot takes these rules and shoots them into the stratosphere. Any ability you can capture has a new robotic variant, completely changing their utility and best use cases. While only 14 of the original abilities make an appearance like this, it still stunned me the entire time I played. Nah, they wouldn't have made a robotic version of Parasol. That's such a niche attack. They absolutely did, and it's killer. Well, what about Microphone? That's a weird 3-use ability. It's got infinite uses now, and you can terrify turtles. From these familiar skills, you completely flip the world of action to the actual gameplay. Those logs that were just in your way? Slice them. Giant golden dice trying to crush you? Bash them for a quick gambling sesh. Even beyond the action, you get this wonderful change to puzzles. You can lift these giant cubes for platforming and circuit connection. You can straight up move cannons for proper lift-up capabilities. And your enormous arms can screw cogs for traversal and destruction. Just to put icing on this cake, your collectibles being stickers means you can put them on both of the mech's arms, so they're actually fun to collect now, as you can actually see them. On these merits alone, I would consider this game to be an incredible success, but we are far from done with what this game does so fantastically. The third level introduces a giant train, bringing the batteries to the gameplay. Like the keys we've seen before, the batteries can power all sorts of items in a level. Saws to burn obstacles, and teleporters to bring you items and secret doors. The scope has been beautifully expanded from Triple Deluxe, keeping the compact design for the ease of play, but opening up the backgrounds like Return to Dreamland to give this genuine epic feeling of scale and intensity. Look at how much you can see outside of the train. Look at this ending point with the conductor fast asleep in the boiling metal face of the machine itself. Once you think it's all over, you immediately run into this guy, a mid-level mini-boss with more design effort and mechanics than we've ever seen before, all brought to a fiery climax against the antagonistic Anaconda with the final screw racing against a gang of torpedoes. Once you finish that, just look at how the fourth level starts. A pulsing laboratory of puzzles and traps, giving us all we need to traverse and solve wild puzzles while battling a few of the new dudes with attitude. I'll stop. Once we've carved through this landscape, we finally get a chance to face off against the wild woods from before. Clanky Woods. It's a lot of fun to see the circular battles from Crystal Shards make another appearance, only improved by the new animations and attacks that keep you on your toes. At one point, the entire field rises to this tight corridor where you have to face off rockets and leaf orbs, capping off what must be the best first impression of a Kirby game I have had to date. We kick off the second zone with a city, but this time, Mario ain't missing. All the buildings are modeled like juice boxes, busy streets with impatient drivers ready to run you down, all pushed through the cascading lens of rolling rooftops. It's a stellar setting. There's no rest moving into the second level, introducing the jet ability and straight up turning your bot into a plane. Playing half of a level as you normally would, only to approach it in a completely new way with a robot, has me thinking back to Titanfall 2 and your relationship with BT. The first Titanfall game actually coming out mere months before Triple Deluxe did, it wouldn't surprise me if they were inspired by this gameplay flow, although it doesn't seem we take nearly as good care of our robotic buddy. Clown makes a reappearance, but instead of a circus, we get a giant game hall. Billiards, dice, roulette, all the glitz and glamour you'd expect with games of chance. It's a bit early to get into the deeper story here, but a firm theme of this game is about industrialization, mostly the bad side of corporations and their blood-suckery of nature. I can't help but think that this area is a commentary of the invading ship tossing sequins in the eyes of the natives to distract them from the nefarious deeds being done. Or it was just a cool and unique setting to get to jump around in. It could go either way. I don't know any natives that would elect to dodge giant golden balls on a roulette wheel, but you never know. Like any good casino, doing too well will have security running you down. The boss around these parts is a program called the Hollow Defense API. This is a fancy way of making a throwback boss section, but I'm all about it. Facing off against Krakow, Doomers, and Coily Rattler is a fun nod to anyone that's played the previous two games, with a huge callback to Dreamland 2 when you face off against Ice Dragon. That dude is so old, his name is just a description of his attack. We take out another leg of the Metal Beast and head on over to Overload Ocean. I've never been happier to tell you this is the worst section of the game. Storming a cargo bay, facing off against octopuses, and this guy here, his name is Wolf. That's just great. Another case of only half the actual game time being in the water, replacing the beach with racing. Exceptional roadster sections with a drop in and out mechanic. It's like someone knew how fun the rock slide was and decided to go all in on a boosted alternative. Every zone has one of these towers of power, and the fact that they submerge this one is a nice touch. I haven't really touched on them as they're kind of exactly what they look like, brief periods of platforming where they can color swap the background, though I do like these orb obstacles. My brain refuses to avoid their shocking advance. They always have these little memory puzzles that I enjoy. Down the line, they have you holding that clue for minutes, and it adds a nice tether to your progress to make sure that you get those code cubes. There's no dedicated ice world this go around, so the closest you're gonna see is this ice cream factory. Much better in my opinion. Look at how happy this guy is. When we finally fully sink into a water level, they truly send it. It's slow and methodical, giving you a chance to breathe in the vibes and explore any corner you please. Surfacing at the boss, we are greeted by Susie, an employee of this invading starship, and introduction to the meat and potatoes of the story. With a quick monologue, you learn the attack is spearheaded by Haltman, a tycoon of intergalactic proportions. The forces we fought are the cleanup clue bent for full annihilation to claim Popstar for themselves, leading to our first fight against the heart of this company. This revelation recolors all of the game we've played so far. The tree bulbs are parasites. We don't get grassy lands, ice tundras, or any of the sort, as we've been satiated with cities and civilized comforts, factories and processed foods. You know, the things. Kirby is no stranger to the concept. So much of the original titles mesh the mechanical with the natural world, but for the most part, we lived in one of two timelines. Either an untouched valley or a world frozen in time after being completely used. What's astonishing is this is the first time we're seeing the change in real time. Now, just to be clear, I'm not some wild granola crunching tree hugger. I mean, I like the environment. I could see myself hugging, I don't know, that tree. But what really draws my eye is the subtle hand that this franchise has played this element, mainly by making you face the problem with a silent revelation. As much as I love the new places and the added gameplay from the mech suit, by taking part of these niceties, I am in action a part of the problem that's destroying the natural beauty of Popstar. This understanding stares you dead in the face here in the next zone, Gigabyte Grounds. Not so much a desert and much more an oil refinery, this barren land is the first real departure from the whimsical to the challenging. Oddly enough, This feels like the return to the same layout as our first zone, but with the new bells and whistles of combat. Normally, we'd see this kind of mix up with a returning palette, like the vines in the clouds of Return to Dreamland. Only now it's a great reveal of Haltman's actions. This is undeniable when we see the new ability show up, Poison. No, you can't even face a serious subject without the Kirby flair. The fracking machines are giant blenders, which still hits just the right way. In the laboratory section, we get our first taste of internal flying, leading to another fight against the Cog's defense system, which actually turns out to be Kabula. You know, that thing. Okay, not every callback is earth-shattering. I wouldn't know what that thing's name was if it wasn't written on the box. Approaching the next boss has us meeting Susie once again, singing the company song while lost in thought. If you've ever worked a soulless corporate job, you already know how this feels. I know I've been forced to sing a few songs in my career. It's agony. Mildly annoyed, she announces that this is the end. Our time is up. Them's the break, etc., etc. Here's a fight against Meta Knight. Really sweet redesign for this battle, combining the skilled swings of his sword with new aerobatic attacks. I wonder if they're gonna do the thing. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, they didn't. Rest in peace. And we dance to the next area. You already know with a name like Rhythm Root that I am all about the vibe. In full honesty, this whole zone is a reskin of what we've seen before, from the city to the casino, train, and laboratory. But it's the content that really makes a place like this shine, where Triple Deluxe merely meandered. Pulsing underground trip-hop vibes, soaring jazz fusion overtones, just a real smooth ride from top to bottom. Tickets, please. Whoa! It wouldn't be a night in the big city without a return to the casino, but with the training wheels officially off, it's nice to get your reflexes flowing in this ultra-polished arena. Another encounter with Susie, another rendition of the company song, another modified frenemy fight. This time around, you're put to the test with the familiar foe punching up in a 3-to-1 bout. The entire time you're fighting, you constantly ascend the massive tower to the brink of the city, forcing you to fight against their multi-cross cannon on top of the roof. Victory sends the triple imposters flying and brings the metal beast to the ground. Let's finish this. All of this. Within the carnage, we are finally able to enter the invader from the rear hatch. This is gonna be a lot. Immediately struck with the classic ebony interior, statues line the hallway of the Great Leader's domain. You're going to run into the security force here, a slick callback to Metal General. Before you can actually cap the victory, they hit a button and run away. Get used to this. Pipe puzzles bring us through the inner walls of the facilities, bringing us to another fight against the Force and one step closer to the main man behind this conflict. The internal laboratory has one of these tilt slides from Triple Deluxe, and strangely enough, this is straight up the only time they incorporate tilt mechanics in this entire game. Thank you, I love that, but why? Why just have it in this one time here at a random place for like 10 seconds? Especially when you compare that to the tricky fun of working with a robot helper in the background. If you get this one to the very end, you get this excellent outcome. These deadly platforms are great, a perfect example of Kirby logic. Obviously skulls are bad and green is good. Don't mess it up. We can't get through the final gauntlet without a tight mech section, right at the end pulling the most exciting bit of robotic collaboration. Some of the most devious puzzles, large-scale platforming, ingenious use of the new abilities, and of course a return to all the great collection items we've seen before. You gotta have one last encounter with the Snow Bro before we cap a victory. And on top of that, I don't think y'all are ready for the 4th level here. We start with another encounter with the security dingus, no problem at all. Victory leads to the button, but this time we get transported to this place. From what I can tell, this is the land between dimensions, the same place we skulked through as Magalore, though I don't remember dodging Tetris pieces when we did, so I must have missed them. This is the closest thing we get to a boss rush, which I don't mind at all. We mostly face off against those holograms and meet back up with the bolt action snake. When everything is as vibrant and smooth as it is around here, I am down to face any kind of challenge. You always have to try. Alright, let's just do this. I know I can't translate the 3D effect to video here, but this looks incredible. A stunning introduction to our final encounter with Susie. You know, she pities us, really, not understanding the joy of a career life, stuck in our simple ways in the field of pop stars, giving us a grim goodbye with the return of Mecha Knight. Do you think this will stop me? Just look at this parry. I ain't playing around anymore. With Meta Knight firmly defeated, it's time to get to the real culprits of our dismay. They did the thing. Susie is steaming, ready to cast us with another attack before being halted by Haltman. He gives us that good old-fashioned fat cat introduction, explaining his evil plan and the toys he'll use to achieve it. Very much a 007 move, and it didn't work out for those guys. We hop into a beautiful battlefield, the planet through the windows, the gold circuits meeting the purple motherboards of the ebony floors, the absolute bank that hits the screen during the fight. Haltman puts up a genuine onslaught of attacks from his golden mech. This would be a real sweaty session if I didn't pick ESP for the fight. You'll love to see it. Mere inches from victory, we finally see the mask slip off, forcing our foe to initiate the nuclear option. But at the last moment, Susie makes her play, stealing the headpiece, revealing her espionage, and shooting herself in the back of the head. What's going on with you? In all the commotion, the ultra-computer Stardream has taken over Haltman and initiated a planet-glassing attack. Luckily for us, it would be in Susie's favor to not explode, so she sets us up with a mech. Great! I could just go punch the giant computer out in space. Think, Susie! Just in the nick of time, Meta Knight has come back to his senses and rides the halberd into battle, allowing us the perfect opportunity to combine forces for this absolutely legendary moment. The final showdown begins. Stardream strikes from the background, blinding the sky with thousands of lasers and rifting support from beyond. It's only here that you can see the full scope of this encounter. The cogs screwed into the ground, the planetary bases circling our orbit, burning the sky into our amber-flooded showdown. Truly a fight to be remembered. As you could probably guess, victory means very little when you realize what this horrible machine's true plan was, combining with the Mega Base, revealing its final form. Look, this ain't my first intergalactic ship showdown, and I assure you it won't be my last. Show me what you can do, you giant stupid metal ball! Doing enough damage destroys the hull, pulling pieces into the sky and revealing what can only be the worst outcome imaginable. It's that guy from The Thing. In a game filled with callbacks, this is the best one. Facing off with the end boss of Superstar once again, a pure flex from the devs showing us how far they've come in regards to captivating gameplay, interwoven storytelling, planet-shattering outcomes, but most of all, a firm strike in the ground of Kirby's modernity. The bold and experimental, the fresh and the uncompromised. Behold, this is your Silver Age. Anyways, I get dunked on, so I gotta do it again. No complaints from me, though. This fight is absolutely stunning. Sucked into a vortex, geometric patterns glistening with the confident flow of our old enemy, the constant countdown of the attack signaling how close our entire planet is to complete annihilation. One giant breath that leads to our staggering blow allowing Meta Knight to plunge the checkmate.
I don't care how many hearts you put in my way. I am going to scramble you.
We've won, cast out into the depths of space. In the face of the infinite, our mechanical brother cradles us, pushing us back to salvation. Oh no, is it crying?
Don't tell me you made that thing cry. We should have been so much nicer.
The corrupted landscape reverts to its original form. All our friends reaching the surface safely. Susie makes off for the stars, and we run off towards our final conclusion. There's a really difficult feeling this era leaves me with. By one hand, you are looking at masters of a craft, the beautiful atmosphere meeting uncompromised music, all set to a pattern we know and love, with all the bells and whistles we couldn't have before. But once we flip the coin, so much of what we've seen was strangled, scared of stepping out of a box of proven success, and in doing so, leaves us dimly lit within the cardboard of the mundane. The same can be said for all Silver Ages, no longer the pioneers of their land, but simply improving the patterns of our forefathers. But there's more, something that cannot be seen or heard, but felt. By the stance of returning home, exploring the new techniques afforded to us, and finally capitalizing in the freedom of grand scale and originality, not just from these games, but the consoles they call home. I can't help but feel this deep sense of wonder, an exploration of what can be accomplished in the ever-blossom that is the video game landscape, and when we truly get to the core of that feeling, we can all realize it's the same principle that brought Kirby to life in the first place. So to all of you, remembering this moment in time through nostalgic eyes, or for the first time, I thank you for taking this journey with me. Just wait until I talk about the rats! A huge shout out to Lee and Post Mesmeric for their support on Patreon. If you've made it this far into the video, please consider supporting me on Patreon, joining as a member on YouTube, or just joining the Discord to hang out. New videos are on the way, so keep an eye out on Saturdays. That's normally when I upload, and outside of that, thank you for your time, and have a great day.